It's going. It's going. Fucking internet falls out.
Top Lobster Productions.
In the shadows of the ancient ones, they never went away. They're still here today.
Nephilim Death Squad. When the last trumpet sounds and the heavens crack, blah, 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 blah. Nephilim Death Squad. Nephilim Death Squad. Death Squad. Death Squad. Death Squad.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation.
Mr. Nasty, please.
Mr. Nasty, my bad. Before we get into today's show, a little reminder, a great way to support the show is to go to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. You'll be able to watch episodes live with an exclusive chat, gain access to episodes for the general public, unedited versions, as well as early dibs to tickets to Bohemian Grove, which right now we're looking at the 6th and the 7th. I got to go out this week, actually, and secure the venue. I got a couple places in mind. And then there are discount codes off of merchandise from toplobster.com on patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, a rapidly growing community of schizophrenic people. And here you go. You can check out our dope designs made by our very own Top Lobster. I'm not doing this. That's probably a good one. Let's bring that up.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, let's talk about. I also want to plug our Facebook page.
Oh, that's right.
Join the Facebook community. This place is growing. It's growing slow, but it's growing surely. We're going to be focusing a lot of our attention to meta. So go ahead and go over there, and that's where you will find us.
I think that's a good move because we've kind of slowed down on Twitter. I think Twitter's been just fully captured by all the psychological warfare, and maybe it's time to start talking to people that aren't on that platform. So Facebook, if you're on there, find us. We've got a banger of a show, guys. Today we're going to talk about subterranean bases in Plattsburgh, death education programs at Columbine that were teaching voodoo and exposing kids to pornography.
What?
The Minneapolis ICE shooting being used to create division. And if there's time, we'll talk about the turning point connections to Pizzagate. If there's time. Joining us today to talk about that is
Welcome
Austin. I guess this is part 3, technically. Austin.
Part 75 and a couple full, maybe
And
3 or
it's
4
not-
full
it's-
starts.
Yes, and it's going to be
Right.
one of probably a 100 episode series. But Austin, before we get into this, let's tell everybody where they can find you.
Awesome, brother. So you guys should definitely go subscribe to the Underclass Podcast on YouTube for sure. Basically, you can find it on all podcasting platforms as well. But I am doing whatever this is. We just did number 40, I think, episode 40 last night, which was a lot of fun. Couple hours. We just kind of, deconstructed this bipartisan deception, which is playing out as far as just in terms of the level of the manufactured immigration crisis that I believe is strategically in reality, I think, generated to really escalate the culture war in this kind of I don't know, operational standpoint. It makes more sense in my mind that they're using this as a fundamental way to distract from so much of what's happening as well. And I think the level of demoralization that is attached to the media cycle it feels unprecedented in a certain sense. And my God, we're just bogged down in nonsensical debate over things that are truly meaningless at the end of the day. And when it boils down to it, if you don't have the proper just set of core values that you've essentially outlined and understood and identified for yourself in a real way, that then you just don't have the moral backbone that you can rely upon to not essentially fall into the premeditated outcome in this dystopian trap of how they pit us against each other in every sense of just the strategic outcome. And also considering the notion of just the level of, it's very interesting because I watched that one battle after another. I showed you guys that clip of Colonel Lockjaw,
That's
right? Sean Penn's
right.
character.
Yeah,
And
I was struggling to remember who showed me that. I saw the preview for it on TV, and I was like, I gotta watch that, but I forgot who the hell told me to watch it. Okay, let's do.
Mhm.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so it's it's a great film as far as like from a direct just the standpoint of a director, or the directorial just expertise of Paul Thomas Anderson is very obvious. He's one of my favorite directors. Honestly, he did. I think my favorite film of all time is probably Inherent Vice, which it stars Joaquin Phoenix and Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro, and it's got a pretty great cast. But for the most part, the main reason I appreciate it is because the value of what it introduces, pop, just in terms of pop culture wise, like it introduces this very valuable concept of honestly a perfect window into the playbook that you can apply into the clandestine operational kind of just again, we're talking the mind war, right? And this is not at all limited to just the psychological operational right value of what they're implementing as far as the playbook is concerned, but it I think is holding, I think it's hand in hand with that of the Gladio operation in modern form. And really, this is just a diabolical strategy of tension to essentially domestically disrupt and destabilize right the general public in the U.S. And I think at really what ultimately takes place is they manufacture consent to I think facilitate the overall totalitarian tiptoe toward the technocratic state, and that in itself is what I'm most concerned with, because you
Mm.
can see it forming around us in the current moments. And I feel like everyone's just caught up in the ideological divisiveness of the window dressing in terms of the political puppets and how they leverage them against us. And my God, I caught a brief glimpse into what the end game might potentially be, as far as some of just looking at like the Monarch program or Project Monarch, right? And seeing these stables of young boys that have been victimized, prepubescent, and to where they've been essentially, you know, overexposed to these levels of programming that includes dissociative identity disorder, right? Which most of these victims suffer from. And what I saw was Paul Benassi, essentially, who's a victim of the Franklin scandal, and went public after Lawrence E. King. He sued him and won $1 million, I believe, in the lawsuit. And he was claiming that Lawrence E. King brought him into the network at 12 years old, and sexually abused him, and then basically tasked him with running roughshod after he was programmed with this DID. Apparently, what they had done is they had essentially provided him with alters, which one of which would be suicidal, right? So they
Mhm.
handlers could essentially trigger this suicidal alter if he let's say went off the reservation, so to speak, right? And began to blow the whistle or name names, or again provide a window into the strategy at play here as far as the mind war is concerned in Project Monarch. Because the reason that I refer to it as that is because the book From Psyop to Mind War, The Psychology of Victory, which feels like the modern psyop doctrine in as far as the social engineering and psychological warfare aspect of what they have very well in terms of evolved into this extremely sophisticated level that I think is basically impossible for most people to conceptualize at this point, right? So, but the only point I'm making is it seems as if the end result was not only to utilize Paul Benassi to help procure other child victims and condition them to be submissive in terms of their abuse and things of that nature, but he was also supposed to allegedly join the military, and then they would send him to Germany, which he had already been apparently um, distributing pornography, child pornography internationally on behalf of the network and specifically on behalf of the leadership hierarchy within NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And but the what they apparently wanted him to ultimately become was this useful puppet, in terms of he would spend 6 years in the military, then he would apparently be in some sort of prominent position during that time. Then he would be brought back to the States. He would effectively retire after 6 years of military service, and then they would have him run for public office, and he would basically become a politician. And what he claimed was that he would then therefore become ultimately a puppet on behalf of the network, and they would utilize him as a prominent, valuable asset to obviously push this dystopian agenda forward. So if that's legitimate, which I do believe this, I think that Paul Benassi is directly connected in with John Wayne Gacy and the John David Norman Odyssey Foundation, because he's the one who claimed that he witnessed the pink index cards, right, which were in John David Norman's warehouse and various properties where he kept his sexual blackmail archives, essentially. And it's just fascinating that he claimed that John Wayne Gacy was behind the kidnapping of Johnny Gosch, right, and the paperboy fetish that was ordered through Michael Aquino. And he names Michael Aquino as essentially the founder of and being involved with the origin of Project Monarch and bringing it domestically into the States after studying essentially the Nazi scientists and these various military operatives within the SS who had fundamentally helped evolve these techniques. So I don't know. It's just the only reason I bring that up is because I think the level of deception at this moment is again, I don't think the vast majority are even capable of properly interpreting this manipulation as it's playing out. And I had just seen you. I think I watched you. It was a tweet that you had made a couple of days ago about the Minneapolis ICE agent shooting this mother, right, fatally, um, which sparked nationwide protests, obviously. And the reason I brought up one battle after another is because I remember first talking about it on whatever this is, and Sam was like, "So, what do you think the end result of this truly? What was the intention behind the film? Like, as far as the plot line, and what was it attempting to evoke from the audience?" And I really just came down with my takeaway being to further escalate the culture war through the immigration crisis, and therefore, right, also provide this left wing, because it really was left wing progressive pornography propaganda in a way, right?
Mhm.
As far as like, it's all about this leftist revolutionary organization called the French 75, and what are they doing? They're they're conducting and engaging in domestic terror operations as if they're a Gladio paramilitary organization. It's just fascinating because I've seen that play out so many times. I mean, my God, in Belgium, right? That's the same thing they were doing with the paramilitary groups there to destabilize the nation and essentially, usher in the new leadership, which would be fully compromised, right? But anyway, it's
Well, you know
it's
what's funny about that?
Mhm.
So you remember the game Final Fantasy VII?
Yes, I love that game. Yeah.
It's a great game. Well, how does it start off? You're part of a sort of a civilian military group who is going about destroying basically like a nuclear reactor that's
Mhm.
damaging to the environment. And even though it's going to cost like all of these people their electricity and their livelihoods, you frame it under the context of doing what's right for the planet. And so, you're vindicated and you go about doing this thing as soon as the game launches. And I was playing that and thinking like, damn, they really did a fantastic job of planting that seed of being part of like the rebel group in our minds. That was psychological warfare. So much of the cultural content that we got through the media was filled with this idea of like rebelling against the status quo, pushing against the elites or whatever. Every video game was being part of a resurgence group of renegades that was here to destabilize and
Right.
disrupt, and that really did bleed into the psychology of fat lesbians, you know, all over the planet. You were talking earlier about that tweet that I made, and I said here, this woman's death is being leveraged by the algorithm to drive us deeper into our ideological camps. I said whether or not the shot was justified is almost meaningless, given that what's being achieved is division. It's obvious that the only rational thing is to turn away from it. Now, here on this show, we're going to poke it, we're going to prod it, we're going to see how it fits, you know, into these different systems and operations that we're talking about. But the reason I made that tweet was because my wife, who is, you know, she doesn't use Twitter. If she does use it, it's for dogs and cat videos and shit like that. Now, I suspect what's happening here is because that's the content she absorb, the algorithm has determined she is a woman, thereby probably has left-leaning values. So if you're going to show her one side or another of the culture war, you're going to show her this side. All morning she's looking at it, Austin, and all morning she's getting inundated with all these videos of the event, and none of the videos are showing the correct angle of this event.
Right. You were telling me that that's a sophisticated level of AI algorithm.
Yes. And I don't think that this event was fabricated. I think it was just opportunistic. It was the perfect kind of event where you can draw a dividing line and, you know, funnel people into one camp or the other.
Can I ask, because we're talking about like these levels of programming, and I was just talking with somebody in the coffee shop about this, and the guy, obviously we're in Florida, he's an older guy, so this is a right-wing person. And he's like, you know, it's very simple, like just obey the law. And I was like, yeah, you know, as a Christian, I'm not so sure that we're called to obey every law. So let's put that there. But as a radical left protester, they're very comfortable and they understand what the cops do. They say that they're murderers. They say that they're pigs. They say that they do X, Y, Z. They act on behalf of the state, and they're not incorrect. From a libertarian standpoint, I would say the same thing if I was a libertarian.
Right.
Now, knowing that, I would also understand the circumstance that I'm in. Right?
Yes.
So if you're going to provoke a cop to do a thing, I don't see how you'd be surprised when the reaction and the action is this.
Oh,
and we're
my
going to have
God.
some kind of nation. Now, the nationwide outrage is completely different, because once this perspective is put out there from both sides, and once the story's out there, people are going to spin it and do what they want to do. But are we looking at an unintentional martyr, like a pre-programmed martyr in such a sophisticated way that, because they do know that this is kind of what will happen to them, and then they kind of do this anyway.
Right.
And here we go again. It's like, what exactly is this in your opinion?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because, like, first of all, none of this should have even happened, right? And I think both sides look terrible in terms of right, if you're objectively interpreting this high impact event, emotionally speaking, and obviously what it provides in terms of cannon fodder, as far as the ideological subversion tactics being implemented upon us. But I just wanted to briefly mention that you brought up Final Fantasy VII. I thought of all the ancient deities involved, that you're summoning these guardian forces, Shiva, Quetzalcoatl. Like these are ancient deities that legitimately apply to understanding history and how much we've been inundated with these strange pantheon of gods, whether it's you know, let's say neo-pagan in its new age form, or and I think so many different
God, I
groups.
love it when Austin goes there. I thought we didn't even go there. He's like, did you notice all the ancient deities?
I'm trying to keep it nuts.
Hell yeah,
trying to keep it nuts and bolts for Austin.
Let's go. Yes, you're absolutely right.
I see you've gone full blown crazy. So
Hey, you guys had an effect on me, but
I'm sorry about that.
I
There's no cure.
I think if you're being honest with yourself and you're willing to reflect on your ideas, you just have to be able to identify and acknowledge the level of manipulation, right? Just in terms of psychologically speaking, and how much we've been conditioned from childhood to fall into these preordained outcomes and these traps of ideology, and these camps that are effectively, you know, prisons of mind control in a way. But Sephiroth as well. I always thought he was such a great character. You look into Sephiroth, and my God, he's basically drenched in the Kabbalah, right? And and it's
that's
fascinating.
what it's called. The Sephiroth is called. I believe that's what the Kabbalist tree is called.
Yes, exactly. That's what the claim is, and it's just fascinating to me. And in no way is that coincidental, obviously. But yeah, this new left wing martyr, though, that's very much, I think, been essentially, yeah, designed and programmed into us to accept these interesting individuals who effectively are just political victims in a way, if they aren't. But I will question the reality of events such as this. Like, my first thought was, could this have been a staged event in any real way? Like, I will start there, and mainly because the Boston Marathon bombing, I truly do believe, right, that was hyper reality filmmaking, and crisis actors from Vision Box, the Denver, Colorado acting studio, provided them, and they bring they bring reality and realism to these high impact events, obviously, and they can activate them at any time with these. What I think is so strange is they have military grade moulage and blood assembly squibs, or blood squib assemblies, right? Which they basically will provide these crisis actors, which is why I think they had the secondary explosion down the block after the primary explosion at the finish line, because the timing of it was so perfect, just in terms of a clandestine covert operation, and how you would want to distract and draw attention away from the original scene, and then also provide the smoke cover from the secondary blast for all the crisis actors to get into place.
Yeah.
And watching the videos, it becomes, it's too strange to completely, set aside and be willing to ignore, and especially deny. But the manufactured immigration crisis,
Yeah.
what is the ultimate goal?
Well, hold
Divide the
on before
general
we go there,
population.
because
Yeah,
I do
sorry.
want to ask you. Well, are we gonna? No,
Just keep
okay.
going.
So I do want to ask you about that ultimate goal, but I want to highlight a little bit more about this situation and the way that
Mhm.
it kind of gives to both sides, right? So obviously, it's a conservative value right now to be in alignment with ICE, and to be against leftists and Democrats and things of that nature. And I know what you're talking about when you say you have to have some amount of speculation as to whether or not this is a real event or it's a manufactured event. I
Right.
tend to think it's a real event. I think that what
Probably.
happens is they set the stage for these events to take place, and then they look for ones that are more opportunistic to frame than others. And I think this one just happened to be the gift that keeps on giving, if you want to set a narrative. And it's just fascinating because you have that ICE aspect. And then, of course, you have the correct angle of the footage where you can see not only her tires spin,
Mhm.
indicating that if she were to have traction in that moment, she probably would have done some damage to that guy. But you do obviously see the chest cam footage from him and proper angles where it's like, yeah, the guy got hit. And this doesn't get hit in a way that's life threatening or anything, but this situation does go to a point. It's escalated to such a degree that she is now evading the authorities. She's managed to actually hit one of them. And for all intents and purposes, you can speculate she's about to go on a chase. It's going to be a car chase, right? They're not going to let her go. Somebody's got to
Mhm.
pursue her, which makes it exponentially more dangerous. It's icy out, tensions are high. So there's your narrative for the right to justify the whole thing. And then, of
Absolutely.
course, if you're on the left, you're only getting the video footage where you can't see the angle of him getting hit. You can't see the angle of the car tires spinning before they finally gain traction. And you're just seeing what looks to be culture warriors out there defending the downtrodden and these poor disaffected people who, by the way, got there by voting for porous border and poor immigration policy, that leads to mass immigration. And who's voting for this? I did a little grok thing the other day where I was asking this question, give me a list in the last 10 years of all the things that were on the ballot that you voted for that could have led to
Mhm.
porous borders and mass illegal immigration. It gave me a whole list of them,
Right.
primarily by voting for Democratic politicians. This is how you end up getting this thing. And then I said, give me the demographic that most supported this. Break it down into two groups: gender and age. Predominantly, it's Gen Z to millennial women. That's it. At the end of the day, Gen Z to millennial women, which is to say, and no real apologies to the ladies that are listening. I think this is something you need to hear. High emotion, low information voters are voting for the very circumstances that lead to the thing that you're now objecting to, which is ICE, because such a mess has been made that, that takes a real shitty cleanup crew to get the job done. A lot of people are going to get swept up in it. A lot of chaos is going to happen, but they don't realize they're the ones. And I mean they, because these are the people that are the most vocal online right now that are screaming about this, immigrant rights and nobody's illegal and da 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 da. And they're screaming about all the horror stories. This is how you got here in the first place. Emotions. You got here by way of emotions in the first place. Now you're emotional about the thing that you were emotional about in the first. It's a huge mess. My question is, now that we can see the two camps that this is broken into pretty obviously, it's just a matter of framing the narrative. What do you think the goal is? Because that's always the next question, right? What's the goal? Now we've established, Austin, that division is the goal, right? Is that the only thing that you think is happening here?
Well, it's so funny to see the blatant display of ideological hypocrisy attached to the interpretation on both sides of the political aisle, obviously. And I think just seeing the deporter in chief obviously open up the as far as just allowing Venezuelans to essentially apply for refugee status, right? And
Crazy.
it's fascinating. You see that, and then you see him basically buying Greenlanders for $100,000 a pop. It's just like, what are we doing here? And then as far as even when Maduro is kidnapped, right? What do you see with the left? They're overtly defending him, although Biden ran on the same agenda of regime change in Venezuela and was effectively laying the stage and essentially even I believe providing the groundwork for this immigration crisis is in terms of freely opening up the borders to such an extent. This is the pendulum swing of the bipartisan deception, and people aren't aware of how it's leveraged against us. And it's truly just the window dressings that we focus on in terms of how we defend and protect against our own best interest, which is fascinating because we would prefer to defend a perfect stranger who's more than likely a politically connected pedophile, right? Who in no way is out for the best interest of the general public in terms of society at large. But as far as and also what's interesting is the fact that it wasn't his body cam footage that we got that additional footage of that basically justified. It was really the right wing angle, I guess you could call it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a problem in terms of if you're actually making contact with a police officer or an agent of some kind. I mean, like, you're legitimately asking for a reaction, and I think in no way have we been given the example or let's just say the window into the status quo in terms of police obviously more often than not tend to escalate and instead of de-escalate, which I find to be a legitimate problem. And in no way will
Austin, I was watching a video on that on today's morning show, and I was making a joke about it, but it is true. These people, they're standing around, they're screaming at the police. There's elderly white women with bad haircuts screaming, "Shoot me in the face, shoot me in the face."
They'll do it.
Well, and I said, I was like, if you're one of these guys, it's just human nature. You're thinking in your mind, please cross the line.
Oh yeah, give me a reason.
Please, yes, give me a reason.
Especially with like the way they're aligned politically. Like again, like if they're hard right leaning and they're talking about this stuff in the locker room with each other, they're saying like, I wish you would.
I wish a lesbian would.
I wish they, and then you give them a reason, and there you go.
The
Yeah.
entire purpose of the uniform is to separate yourself and segregate yourself from the rest of the general population, and that leads to the team ideology, right? And that plays very much into how they view it. And as far as just policing in general in America, it's them against us, it's us against them, and that's very much the prevailing mentality on both sides, which is unfortunate. Or you fall into the right wing camp of the thin blue line, which is just as much of a problem in my opinion. I just these are the stormtroopers of the empire in my mind, and when you green light and hyperactivate the immigration force to obviously, I think most of this is very much for public perception purposes only, as far as look at all these arrests. And also, ICE has specifically been tasked by the current administration to create content to create viral
Yeah, you
content.
can see
Now
that
that
happening, and it's also really good. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm like, damn, this is well
Oh,
done,
the
dude.
trust the plan stuff is a lot of
Yo,
fun.
that's what's
Hey,
really
man.
crazy. The trust the plan, Patriots are in control shit.
It's alarming because it's alarming at how clued in they are
Yeah.
to what the mythos is around Trump and them,
Mhm.
and they're playing exactly to that narrative. I really wish I could put my mind. I mean, maybe we should have that guy
Snedeker.
Dave Snedeker
I
back
like him,
on.
yeah.
A great dude, and I think he was really good on like a lot of the Q post stuff, but he's still in that community. I just really would love to know what is going on
Yeah.
with them right now, because they're being validated and
Mhm.
confirmed.
Well, this is the
like
thing.
crazy.
I think that Q serves this purpose. And Austin, you just said something a moment ago. These are the stormtroopers, right? These are the ground soldiers, the enforcers for this power structure. What I think is fascinating that could be, and I really want your opinion on this, Austin, because you're much more keyed into this than I am. I'm politically retarded. I just have feelings about a certain thing. And what I see happening right now is
I
people.
got emotions about
I got
it.
emotions about it. I see people cheering for the empire. To what end, though? To what end? Because for many, many years, everyone, conspiracy theorists, doesn't matter, whatever, has been speculating that part of the plan, trust the plan, is to create martial law in these major city centers, right? I never thought that I would ever see a day come where people were more or less cheering for martial law, right? And
Mhm.
call it what you will, lipstick on a goat. I don't know if that's an expression, but it's the military
That's
presence. What is
a
it?
pig.
Lipstick on a pig.
Lipstick on Ernesto.
Shout out to Ernesto.
Well, he had some lipstick, but that's a different type of lipstick.
no. But any other name, it doesn't matter. What we're talking about is a military presence in a city area, locking it down, enforcing curfews, checking for papers, et cetera, et cetera. I always imagined that that was going to be on everybody's radar and that it was going to be a bad thing. And that, you know, much like all the programming I was subjected to in my youth, we were going to be part of the rebellion, you know, that there was going to be checkpoints and lockdowns, and we were going to be. Now, anybody who's at least a little bit of a critical thinker is going, throw these leftists in jail, you know, basically rooting for the side that would be implementing martial law. It takes a little bit more of peeping game above that to be like, oh my God, is this a plan? Is it finally here to implement martial law in these major city centers? Or am I just an alarmist?
Well, you know, the same thing fundamentally took place with No Kings, right? As far as just the overwhelming outcry from the right wing base, as far as just, you know, entirely just willing to facilitate and call for intervention, as far as the federal agents being deployed and even the National Guard, obviously, to essentially combat this left wing threat that was forming. But you know what this will do is, through the bipartisan deception and the pendulum swing, if we allow this pretext, right, as far as this is a sort of a precedent-setting operation in a certain sense, in my mind, and that because it leans into the notion that in the future, as far as the next left-wing administration that comes into office. Now, what if they want to just as much implement this strategy, just ideologically, you know, in reverse, as far as I'm concerned, and inevitably, what we will see is right-wing protests take place under the next left-wing presidential administration, and then the left wing will just as much call for federal intervention, National Guard presence, and you will see a further crackdown in right-wing states as well, in major city centers, more than likely. That's just my expectation, because that's how they consistently push the goalposts, right, into that more dystopian direction, and unfortunately, all the while manufacturing consent, as far as just the subversive notion of how they essentially, just it's all about psychological manipulation, in my opinion, to for that very purpose of creating that tool, or, you know, at the very least, leveraging that tool of manufactured consent for their benefit. And you see the reason I mentioned the body cam not being the source of that footage, because I would love to see the body cam footage, but it's not yet been made available. The only thing that we've witnessed is apparently from his cell phone. So you have Jonathan Ross,
Ah,
the ICE agent who effectively murdered Renee Nicole Good, right? Or at least killed her justifiably, whatever you want to say. You know what
however
I'm
you want to
saying?
frame it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, um, right. And the other thing is my issue with obviously do you really need to shoot to kill in that moment is my concern, and
No,
I just felt like not the proper reaction, but again, it's like, man,
I don't
I would
think that you
never.
would. I don't think you had to, but I do think it would stand up in a court of law.
I
Right,
I'll
you're
I'll
probably
say
right.
this. If I'm pulling out my gun,
Hmm.
it's
Shoot to
not
kill.
to yeah,
It's
yeah,
not to maim and wound someone.
not to
Yeah, no,
maim.
Yeah.
That's a
I
different tool.
understand. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and by the way, that leads to an occult numerology connection and a very interesting reference point from one JD Vance, which was perfectly packaged in the moment and probably went under the radar because it was in tweet form. But I'll tell you that in a second, because it completely it applies directly to that of the ICE agent, right? Who Jonathan Ross, who apparently was holding his iPhone in one hand and the gun in the other, which is, what are you doing, bud? Like, this is
Yeah.
this
Doing it
is
for
how
the
you
gram.
guys operate on the
Yep.
ground. You got to make that content, son. And so yeah, ICE apparently is under pressure from the White House to create as much content as possible, and the Washington Post actually reported on this. And I thought it was fascinating because you have thousands of internal ICE messages that went public through this report. And they were having all this. It was very commonplace for them to be celebrating over much of the viral content of the arrests, and even some of the more violent interactions with these immigrants or left wing protesters, whatever. And interestingly to me, you have. ICE basically being told by the current administration and to not only fundamentally create these more engaging social media channels on behalf of the federal organization, but um, it was during this current administration when Trump basically greenlit the immigration crisis during his second term as a priority. And ICE, and again, this is for public perception as far as you're getting what you voted for. No, you're not. You see the hypocrisy blatant in your
Yeah.
face as
Yeah.
far as Venezuelans now are seeking refugee status, and after our regime change operation. So it's a little difficult for me to obviously not. And I mentioned the left wing hypocrisy. I mean, it was under Maduro where pornography was outlawed, abortion was essentially outlawed, and I mean, there were so many different
Usury.
policies that would fly in the face of their alleged ideology and the standpoint of what they find to be most crucial
Is
and
there
pivotal.
any group that would be usury being outlawed, pornography, and
I'm not getting into it.
okay, all right. I was just
I'm not
checking.
I'm not
Yeah,
doing
exactly.
this.
All right, I was just
Which, by
asking.
the way, I
By
think
the
it was
way,
like
I know
only
what I'm.
9 sorry.
I just
I
wanted
was
to say I know I'm alluding to the Jews in this particular instance, but I do happen to think that that's part of the theater of this is like is another drop in the bucket of the Jew noticers.
Oh,
And
yeah.
It's just more that plays into it. It is interesting as Austin is talking about this like this volleyball ping pong effect of like we're putting this increasing totalitarianism that's going from the left to the right
Mhm.
back to the left seemingly with the midterm elections. I just what I know for sure is it has to end up in the right. Whatever we're seeing with Christian nationalism and like the bizarre nature of this of the government that you're describing and the people that are willing to back it and its large sweeping motions to arrest or kill citizens or whatever it may be, and they're cheering it on. We just had a pastor on that I did ask that. I said, hey, he wants to, do something to all of the people that are light and the loafers. And I go, well, who? And he goes, yeah, the government. And I was like, the same government that's filled with pedophiles, the same
Mm.
government that created death camps and death curriculum in
Yeah. I
Columbine.
think they need
Yeah,
maybe
you're
a
right.
re-education camp would be nice.
Yeah.
Man, I'm
But
saying that it's you had mentioned Christian nationalism. I think Christianity is attempting to be hijacked, if not,
Yeah.
in terms of this
I think it
political
already is.
application. Yeah, and I think that Peter Thiel and his acolytes are very much involved in pushing this framework of the New Age Antichrist, which I think falls perfectly in place with this Baconian philosophy that they reference at all times. Which Francis Bacon, I mean, are you kidding me? This is a Rosicrucian mission, honestly, and to see the level of control he has over one JD Vance as well, who my God, he claims in the Hillbilly Elegy or whatever he wrote that he had convinced himself he was gay. That's a quote in the book. I convinced myself I was gay. That's what he says. And
Wait, who said that?
JD Vance, man,
That's why you wear that eyeliner.
100%. And
That's
and
so cool.
if you look, I read this investigative article called "The Catholic Coup." JD Vance, PayPal Mafia, Opus Dei, and Knights of Malta. And
Jeez.
yeah, it blew me away because I truly do believe Opus Dei, P2, Le Circle, the Knights of Malta, they are all heavily involved and have been. I mean, from I think it was Kissinger who was in the Knights of Malta, and along with one of his key acolytes as well within the context of the Watergate scandal, which was very interesting that he was very much a prominent member of these organizations of P2 and things of that nature. But yeah, it was what I thought was so crazy about that is that basically JD Vance claims that he converted to Catholicism after being a self-described atheist, right? Who had convinced himself he was gay. Then he cites Peter Thiel directly for being the reason for this radical change in ideology and for his religious conversion on top of that. And then he talks about how the most important event in my time as a law student at Yale was a talk by Peter Thiel in 2011. And,
There you go.
he claims he basically Thiel was obsessed with this French philosopher René Girard, who proposed a theory of mimetic rivalry, along with the idea of universal scapegoat myth, apparently. And so yeah, this group becomes effectively cult like, is how they're described at Stanford, as far as Thiel's little usual suspects and these strange venture capitalists and everything surrounding him. And one was known as like a white nationalist by the name of Jeff Geisa, and not entirely sure how to pronounce his name, but he's the one who apparently was behind weaponizing memes, politically speaking. Um,
Yeah.
as
Dude, we're
the,
in that.
Dude, it's fascinating. And what did he do? His first order of business apparently was to combat Hillary Clinton, although he would later on effectively support Biden, which I thought was interesting. But on behalf of the Trump campaign in 2016, Hillary Clinton became the scapegoat of this mimetic warfare, this which I thought was very interesting. And so anyway, I just think when you see, and the implication is that apparently basically 2/3 of the judges in the Supreme Court are part of an organized crime syndicate in a ring which involves these Jesuits and P2 and yeah, the Knights of Malta. So again, it's like if that's the background to the PayPal mafia, and if you want to
Yeah.
look into Peter Thiel's
Poor
father,
Matt, you just
holy
made Matt get PayPal.
I actually want to say this real quick because he mentioned the universal scapegoat myth, which I never heard of, and I imagine that there's people in the audience who haven't. So its core structure is a crisis emerges, a social breakdown, economic collapse, moral panic, political instability, something like that. Collective anxiety seeks resolution. So in that way, it's almost like a kind of parallel to a Hegelian dialectic, right? So the community cannot face its own internal contradictions or failures, and so blame is externalized. Person or a group is marked as other, foreigners, heretics, witches, traitors, elites, peasants, minorities, kings, or even gods. Ritual expulsion or destruction takes place. So this exiled, killed, imprisoned, canceled, or symbolically destroyed, and temporary restoration of order ensues. So the social cohesion returns until the next crisis. So I thought that was actually really fascinating because it's like a more thoughtful Hegelian dialectic instead of a simple. I mean, it is a problem reaction solution, but it's a little bit more focused on, what the reaction would be. The reaction would be in this particular instance is to identify a scapegoat, and then the solution would be to or exile or cancel them. So
Right.
In that way, you can see that these things, they do a great job of outlining the systems that we're subjected to constantly. And it's part of
Absolutely.
why I've receded from Twitter. And I know you've done something similar, Top, where it's like Twitter to me is only fun if I can get on there, cause a little bit of chaos, say something funny, say something outrageous. But what it's become lately is a place where
It's an exercise in futility.
yes, because the official players have won out, I think. There is no reclaiming Twitter. There was a time where things were in flux.
Well, there's also been a very clear line drawn of, if you want to be an official player,
Yep.
Here's what you got to do.
Yes.
And it's about the algorithm. So it's like, all right, do you want to feed this thing? And for a while, I'm like, yeah, I'll play along the lines of the algorithm. But as you see, the algorithm could just like dive into more, not obscurity, but like, and not even insanity, but just like, it's because it's a guided insanity.
It's like almost Mockingbird media like.
Yeah, and they're like, here, comment on this, and like, here, do your thing.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
on
man.
this, and I'm looking at, I'm like, I refuse. I just don't
Yeah.
want to do that anymore.
There was a time, a short window after Elon got it, where the influencers, let's use that gay terminology, who were really big on Twitter, all of a sudden they were brought down, and the average person was elevated and given a chance through the new system of like buying a blue check mark and things like that. And I
Yeah, but then
experienced
immediately after, he handpicked the people
Yes.
that he wanted to
Yeah.
promote, and then that didn't work because they got pointed
it was
out.
just a new game.
So now the quiet game is very much, this is what we're talking about today.
Right.
Yeah.
Who's
But
gonna
now
take
Grok
on it?
AI is apparently generating child pornography without any sort of
Whoa.
accountability whatsoever. Did you hear this? Which is fascinating
No.
stuff. But yeah, honestly, with this story, like I thought it was perfectly up the alley and avenue of what these PayPal mafia pedophiles are hoping to essentially ultimately achieve. And again, it's like, are we still talking about Epstein? Because obviously not. And as far as the new demoralizing news cycle and media cycle that we're experiencing in this moment, so we're all basically enduring this sinister form of the strategy of tension, right? But I do think that it's very interesting to at least mention the fact that clearly, one, I had mentioned that 33 because I talked about the occult reference that JD Vance had made, and I
Yes.
feel like I should at least mention that real quick. But
Yes.
what did I just say though? I was about to tell you something and I forgot because I instantly thought of the 33. But you had just sparked something in my mind's eye, Top, and I can't remember now what the it was.
We were talking about the influencers and basically like the new game that's being played on Twitter and why we receded from that. That's very much like a Mockingbird media kind of, if you
Right.
indicate you're
Okay.
willing to
Yeah.
play.
Okay. Let me just tell you this tweet, then I'll reference that Mockingbird media aspect to Minnesota, and then we'll segue into Columbine finally. So JD Vance decided he's going to shame everyone who's essentially interpreting this as police violence that was unjustified, right? And
I
it's
didn't realize that. That's interesting.
yeah, he basically said everybody repeating the lie. This is some innocent woman out for a drive in Minnesota. You should be ashamed of yourselves, every single one of you.
Mm.
What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his
That's
leg.
right. That's
So you
right.
think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile?
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh my God, bud. Like it's
Well, so there's an emotional leverage, which is always something that you should watch out for. And then there's
Mhm.
the occult insertion of the number 33, which
Exactly.
is, always rearing its ugly head. But man, I
They
mean,
can't stop that, huh?
no, they can't. But everybody who's, even if you're on the side of the ICE agent, never let anybody who's in a position of authority start leveraging you emotionally. That's
Right.
where we do a lot of real bad places because what about grandma? What about all the other people? Like all this emotional leverage shit is how we got to some really horrifying places. So
It's also how we got to like some dark places for ourselves. Like we had to deal with people trying to emotionally leverage us, and then I had to actively shut down any emotions that I have.
mm,
and then it kind of makes you a bad person
Well,
too.
we even talked about it at the top of the show. How did these people get to this position where there's mass immigration and ICE agents are, getting the good and the bad and everybody in between in the wrap up? It's because you have low information, but you're highly emotionally reactive. Those two things are a really bad combination, and that's how we got here. That's exactly how we got here. So anytime they want to use children, which they've done that too. What about the children? I mean, I know it sounds cold, but you. What about the
Yep.
children? You don't. I'm not hearing it because it's always packaged in, as something that looks like empathy and sympathy and all of the above. And then what's within it is something, always horrible. So what is he trying to get right now? He's trying to galvanize people to their ideologies even further, because when JD Vance comes out and speaks to one side, the people that hate him are going to flock to the other side, and they're already over there.
You think he really had 33 stitches though?
I wonder.
Mhm.
What if he actually just did have 33 stitches?
It is crazy
Possible.
though, the number of just as far as the 33 symbolism and that's layered into these strange high impact events and emotion arousing violent false flags, which it does feel like is a key component in what I view as, because they list that out as far as within the context of the mind war. It's fascinating, but I do remember what it was. It was the AI chatbot generating basically child porn, right?
That's
And
right. That's
essentially,
right.
there's a user photo or posted photo, right? So this user basically prompted Grok to generate an image, and it was an image of two young girls. One of them being 12 to 14, the other 14 to 16, and he prompted Grok to generate an AI image of them in sexy underwear turned around. Grok then created the image and shared it on December 28th. And obviously, the content that was depicted is illegal and unlawful in terms of minors being sexually exploited and depicted under U.S. law. They even mentioned the specific law that it violates, but the penalty itself includes like up to 5 to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, and to register yourself as a sex offender.
Grok is a
Damn.
registered.
Right.
And people that are into that loli or lolly, whatever it is, there's like form of anime. We've had this discussion on this show before to some degree, because maybe it was on a timeline cleanse, but there was like some bus driver who was male, but he's dressed like a woman. He's horrifying. He's got pigtails and he calls himself loli, and the chat's like, that's actually a thing. Comes from, I forget, like some movie or something like that, but it has to do with an anime genre too, where all of the characters are like children, and then there's all this horrifying crap that goes, and they say, well, it's just cartoons, nobody's harmed. That's funny to know that there's a law about that, because if Grok can go to jail, so can these anime enjoyers.
Exactly. And what they're claiming is that potentially the XAI could face investigative probes and individual liabilities vary. But we all know no one in terms of the leadership at X will be held accountable for this. And that's what is so disturbing at the end of the day. And my conclusion being that, they're conditioning us to, for one, they're normalizing pedophilia. That is happening, and
Yeah.
it's a real just it's a disgusting a prospect. But at the same time, the only last point I wanted to mention as far as Minneapolis, and then we'll finally segue, is that what Renee Good reminded me of was
that?
it. She's receiving this very similar disingenuous mockingbird media, manipulative and reactionary spotlight, right? Which it reminded me instantly of Ashley Babbitt, just a reversal ideologically, right?
Yeah.
It did
Wow.
feel this way.
Yeah.
And the timing of it so uniquely convenient in terms of just after January 6th, this
Yep.
takes place, right? And it struck me, honestly, instantly. I thought of the bipartisan pendulum swing, and how this deception really plays out, and the ICE agent. Obviously, I think that 33 connection is just too much to set aside, just because I find it so fascinating, and obviously it could just be coincidental, but my God, you pair that with the influencer industrial complex and all of these strange prominent voices cheerleading I mean, we're violating international law, kidnapping a foreign leader. I don't care what you think of the person. And the communist justification, no shed tears over a dead commie. It's just like, man, here's the issue: is that I think at the end of the day, if you don't actually have, because again, it truly reveals the lack of ethical consistency. That's what I believe, despite ideological differences, which is very disgusting to witness, and something that I find very frustrating, because obviously I try to remove myself from the ideological capture that is permeating through modern society in this way, disrupting where we honestly, any kind of genuine and organic path that we could potentially be on as a society is completely and totally just disrupted by this process and this current agenda and playbook. But yeah, you have to maintain principled core values in order to even provide yourself with the proper moral foundation, I think, to rely upon in times of crisis like this. And man, otherwise you're just leaving yourself entirely vulnerable to this sophisticated level of propaganda, which is just consistently and constantly leveraged against us by these unelected bureaucrats, for the most part. Obviously, utilizing these political puppets, but they're so heavily invested in controlling the outcome, and the main tool of which they rely upon seems to be the age old tactic of manufactured consent. So
Yeah.
give
It's
them
like a
what they
thing that they
want.
do. They do it
Yeah.
like every, so it's January 6th, 2021, obviously. And then in January of 2023, we have another Tier Nichols protest and Stop Cop City protests that end up getting violent and all this other crap. And then January 2024, and then January 2025 with the immigrant policy protests, and then now 2026 with the anti-ICE protests. It's like I noticed that like January just seems to be like they pick a flavor. Let's do
Mhm.
some political protests and some civil unrest in January
Oh
seems to be
man,
the thing ever since the
you remember
6th. But
last year, right? I mean,
yeah,
it was the New Orleans attack and the Vegas
yeah,
Cybertruck, right? I mean,
yep.
my God, it's just psyop season is alive and well, right? And
I don't think we ever left it. It's just like
Mhm.
we keep calling it psyop season, but every couple of months we're still saying psyop season. And I'm like, we are in this era of humanity where the psyop machine, they've realized it works really well. They've dialed it up to 10, and somebody just broke the handle off and has left it running. And I don't know where it
It's
all.
like the entire government has its iPhone in its hand and it's just making content.
Yeah,
And we're the
Yeah,
content.
we are the
it really
Oh,
is.
that's a horrifying
Hey,
statement.
man,
We're
in
the
Maduro,
content.
right?
We
If
are the
you don't
content.
know, if you don't know, now you know, right?
Oh
That's what
my
I mean.
God,
I'm
bro. And
like
that
the
was a
official White House account. It's
I want them to stop
legitimately.
doing it in a way where I like it too. I'm like, this is a
It's like,
banger.
damn, but they really died
They
in. They're
really
dialed
did,
in
bro.
though.
This shit crushes.
Uh,
All right. I want to move
hey,
on to
can I go
Columbine.
take a piss real quick, and then
Oh
I'll
yeah, no
actually
problem.
start with Columbine. All right, I'll be right
That's
back,
no
boys.
problem. Let's do that.
Yeah,
Appreciate
we'll take a quick break. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's mark this down and we'll edit it out, or maybe we won't edit it out. I don't know what we'll do. 57 mark.
We'll edit it out.
But yeah, so what he's talking about with the Columbine thing, and this is what I wanted to keep it under wraps, and I wanted you to hear it live on the show, but we said it at the top. He was talking about those death education camps last time we had him on,
Mhm.
being in Columbine, familiarizing children with death. And some
Which
of the,
is, I don't know if it's,
I don't
I
think
guess
it's so bad, but to have a course like it's,
I don't want I don't want a state teacher teaching my kid that. Like I teach my kid about death. Like it was good with the chickens and things like
yeah,
that. The dog, they were able
right.
to see this and become familiar. It's a part of life. When you're learning it from school, it becomes a little bit slippery. Like same thing with
I don't want the state teaching my kid about BFing.
Well, they about to.
BFing and then dying. That's a crazy lineup. As those classes, which order that they
Well,
take
what
place
is life besides
besides BF and getting BF'd and then dying? That's so horrifying. Yeah, I agree though. There are certain things. Like my son was saying, he's in 5th grade now, and he's saying he doesn't have like health class. He's like no health class. And my wife was like, well, when I was younger, we had it in like 3rd grade or something like that. I don't remember having health class maybe until middle school. I don't think. I do remember that there was a point though where the teacher brought in dildos and everything. And now in hindsight, I'm like, dude, what the hell is wrong with people? All right, Austin. So, earlier before we started the show, we were kind of outlining what we're going to discuss. And of course, the concept of death education programs came up within the context of Columbine. And you said that you had some more elements to elaborate on that. And two of the things that you said stuck out to me. They're teaching kids. I don't even know what this means. All right. I don't understand how to frame this, but they're teaching kids about pornography, and they're teaching kids about voodoo. And when you said that, I said, stop, please stop talking. We got to talk about this on the show. Obviously, the spiritual implications of voodoo, the spiritual implications of pornography, something that comes up constantly on this show. I had no idea.
And death.
That they were teaching kids.
Interesting trifecta.
So I want to start there because that's very it's morbidly fascinating, but I think it's also very telling given the fruits of this program. And I would say the fruits of this program are obviously Columbine. And so what do you mean they're teaching kids about? Let's start with the pornography. What?
Yeah. So I believe it was in terms of teaching the children how to have better, which was just abhorrent to imagine. But then you have this really I gained a brief window into what was potentially happening at the school through one of the Columbine students who later on. He's really, there's a tragic story attached to this individual, and it seems like, he was essentially prioritized and basically, hung out to dry in a very strategic way, just operationally speaking, how they effectively eliminate some loose end, so to speak, and so a few days after Columbine. You have this strange meeting that takes place between high-ranking members of the Jefferson County Police Department, and all these major officials are holding a private meeting at Jeffco, right? Jefferson County Open Space Center is what it was called. And so they called it the Open Space Meeting, and it was to discuss liabilities of what was called the GERA affidavit, which basically proved that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office failed to follow up on this affidavit, and which would have led them to actually being able to file for a search warrant. It would have easily been obviously greenlit in terms of the search warrant, and would have been approved. And
I'm unsure, Austin. An affidavit is what, like a legal testimony or accusation?
It's basically an internal documentation for an investigative purposes being filed as an open case in a way which will provide or basically an avenue for the investigating officers to then present this affidavit as a means to essentially acquire a search warrant and be granted the privilege of obviously searching the private residence of one Eric Harris, which is what would have happened because Eric Harris had apparently this long-standing like legal background of criminal interactions that he was having with these specific sheriff's deputies, by the way, from Sheriff's Deputy Tim Walsh was one of them. And I believe this is where you have the allegations which were effectively generated in terms of Eric Harris being potentially sexually abused and raped by Sheriff's Deputy Tim Walsh. And that was all leading up to Columbine. And so now I thought, considering the notion that it does look like methamphetamine was being trafficked and distributed through Blackjack Pizza, through some of the more...
But this is all... I just want to say, Austin, you're framing this. I want the audience to keep this in mind. This could be framed as one of two things. Either A, this is just a terrible thing that happened, and this guy is a predator and he did this thing, or you're teaching. There's this obsession with um, voodoo and pornography and death, and now the introduction of methamphetamine, which, in our opinion on this show, opens up the door to entities. You've got all the elements for a purposeful, mission-driven sexual assault that leads to, if you're within the occult arena, this is magic. You know what I mean? So I want people to maybe, I'm not saying that that's definitively what's happening here, but consider framing it that way, because those are one too many elements of magic to be coincidental, in my opinion. Voodoo, teaching about death, pornography, introducing it to children,
Mhm.
methamphetamine, and sexual assault. I mean, we're doing all the blappening here. This is some Aleister Crowley and magic shit.
100%. And, John DeCamp, who was a former Nebraska state senator, I believe, and inevitably wrote the book, The Franklin Cover Up, on the Franklin scandal and child abuse network. He's the one who provided the context of Michael Aquino basically, manufacturing and founding the original origin of the Monarch project, and
Yeah.
also being behind the stable of boys at Offutt Air Force Base and things of that nature. But it's interesting because he plays a role in Columbine. John DeCamp does, and basically he's the one who provides the window into the possibility of Eric and Dylan being victims of sexual abuse directly from members of the sheriff's department, right? And so John DeCamp, he's dealing with a victims advocate by the name of Ron Anye at the time, and basically these are the original sources for the potential sexual abuse claims and the rape of Eric Harris. And the claim is that Columbine shooters had been raped during their January 1998 arrest by Jefferson County Sheriff's Deputy Tim Walsh. And DeCamp
What
had
the
first.
fuck, man?
I know,
Oh my
I know.
God. Wait. Say that sentence over again.
So, John DeCamp and a child victims advocate named Ron Anye claimed that Columbine shooters had both been raped during their January 1998 arrest by Jefferson County Sheriff's Deputy Tim Walsh. And
So they shot up the school, then they got arrested, and then they got BF'd.
it's crazy, right? Well, it looks like in 98, that was leading up to the event. So it seems as if they were potentially being raped before they actually carried out the crime, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
so, yeah,
That makes
that's
more
like,
sense, because I was like, the deed's already done, which
right.
is probably would have been the goal of all of this psychological torment, MK Ultra shit. Makes more sense now in my
Yeah,
mind
this
that it
is
happened pre.
this show seems to
Right.
be a lot about like the topic of of butts.
Well, that's what I was telling him. I was saying, just for context for the audience, you stepped out to go to the bathroom. I think it's important that you hear this. We're dealing with all these elements, right? Voodoo, death education, pornography with children, methamphetamine, and BFing.
It's like, yeah, what was it? The Powerpuff Girls where they're pouring the ingredients in. It's like, this is how you do it.
That is how you do a little chemical X. Yeah, dude.
But I really do think that, because I had mentioned that Columbine survivor, one of the student victims was Mark Taylor, and we'll get into his, the tragic outcome of his life, unfortunately. But it seems to really be reinforced by John DeCamp, because he originally defended Mark Taylor, which I thought was fascinating and obviously really important, because it's a direct overlay to obviously the individual who made the original claim of obviously Eric and Dylan being sexually abused by a sheriff's deputy. But it does make sense in terms of, one, I think there was an active child ring operating in the area that was dealing with members of the Trenchcoat Mafia and other students of not only Columbine, but other local high schools that were in the area as well. And it seems like that's where we got most of the one of the students actually was caught with child porn in his backpack, and he basically was interviewed and interrogated by an investigating officer, which is when he went on the record with all these just extraordinary statements about the Trenchcoat Mafia and the inner workings of the various factions, and how they were represented by even having different names for the various local factions and groups in certain geographical areas, which would provide a distinction. But yeah, so it is fascinating though that it looks like, according to the camp, who first represented Mark Taylor, as I mentioned, and by the way, he was shot several times during Columbine, and apparently he sought a legal case and litigation against Solvay Pharmaceuticals specifically, which was the maker of the psychiatric drug Lovix, which happened to be the same psychiatric antidepressant that Adam Lanza was on, James Holmes was
Mm.
on, and it looks like Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were potentially also on this antidepressant known as Lovix, which was a medication that had been recently prescribed to Eric Harris leading up to this. So, but
So
that
that's the
case,
one that works.
yeah,
By the
that
way, you go, okay, that one works really well.
it seems so, and but that case was inevitably dropped. So, but Lovix or fluvoxamine is what it's also known as. It is a part of a class of drugs known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, obviously
Mhm.
SSRIs, which
Yep.
is primarily used for major depressive disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder. Now that plays in.
Primarily used to disassociate individuals, but yeah.
Exactly. And I think
Mhm.
the OCD aspect of, because mind control victims often apparently display symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder. And this is a direct result from prolonged trauma abuse. And this is obviously the case with Eric Harris. And well, I believe he was potentially raped at Plattsburgh Air Force Base as well, as far as the military base with the subterranean bunkers. I think it was 18 levels, because that's where the mind control experimentation of behavioral modification research was conducted on Eric, and the claim was he was sexually molested there as a part of his programming.
Hey,
So,
Austin, really quick, because
mhm,
as you were mentioning the name of this drug, it rang a bell during, like, for me during 2020 when things were going down and we're looking for uh I don't know, cures or preventatives against. And
Are you depressed because the world shut down?
no, but fluvoxamine was being, it was one of those things alongside of ivermectin and
wow,
man, like, I don't know, vitamin A, like the whole lineup of things that were possibly going to treat, but it was uh, recommended for to reduce the need for hospitalization in high risk outpatients during the early COVID-19 breakout, likely due
Wow.
to its inflammatory effects. So it's like interesting that that is also
It's
it's
because you
peeking
take
its
it and
head.
you go, I don't think I need to go to the hospital
I
anymore.
just feel kind of depressed. I don't know. I mean, maybe it does. It maybe it has like this weird multi-use thing, but it's not surprising that there would be a propaganda effort that would try to get this in you in some other
absolutely.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Well,
makes a
especially
lot
if
of
you
sense.
can get, I think that's part of the public self-diagnosing.
Mm.
You know what I
Mm,
mean? I've got
man,
this, I've got that. Let me go to my doctor and then tell them that I'm a good fit for
There was
whatever,
a
which
there
is
were a number of drugs. There was one for, lupus patients, and I forget the name of this drug, but they were saying to take this for, like, preventatives for COVID-19, and I remember asking my own who had lupus, and she was like, "This drug is not good for me. It makes me feel that way," and I'm just like, "I don't know what to do."
I think it's kind of clever though, because you get a population, some percentage of them is distrustful of the
Mhm.
government. What if you can convince those people who already have a
mm,
natural disposition to not trust authority? What if you could just remove them from the equation by getting them all self-sedated?
Well, that's
exactly.
easy.
Yeah. Clever.
No, it feels too accurate in my opinion. I think mind control drugs are absolutely, being, I think, presented to the public as a viable solution as far as from this strange and I think too. What's the term when you're just far too comfortable as far as just the relationship you essentially cultivate with your physician or your medical doctor. I think more often now these days psychiatrist, right? I mean, it just
Oh
so
yeah.
so much of that, and it seems like the delicate sensibility of the general public is at an all-time low, right? And I think that's also been conditioned into us, and we're very vulnerable, emotionally speaking, as far as just waiting and primed and ready to react. And I think
Yep.
that is what I always try to distance myself from, is the knee-jerk reactionary mentality and mindset, because that's where you find yourself trapped and
Mhm.
unable to objectively pursue the truth. That's the ultimate mistake you can
That's
make.
huge. People get upset when they hear that. It's like you almost lose there's a game that's happening, and you almost lose if you react right away. And that doesn't mean don't react at all, but it means like, because people will say that like, oh, are you supposed to like not do it? And it's like, no, no, no. Just know that there is a thing that is designed. It's asking you to partake one way or another, and it's giving you the options from the jump. So let's say, you know, we were talking about this whole Minneapolis shooting thing. The camps there are very obvious. It wants you to react. If you have right-leaning sensibilities, there's your camp. If you have left-leaning sensibilities, there's your camp. I also think that they've smartened up, and they've realized that conspiracy theorists are another camp, and they're actually treating them like a third political party. And so they're incorporating your choice as a conspiracy theorist into the thing that they give you lately. And I think, for example, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole. I just want to use that as an example. The alien thing, the UAP phenomenon, is offered up for the critical thinker. And so I will say in that way, not to grant sort of superpower level intellect to this system that's pitted against us. I'm not trying to do that. It's fallible. We could overcome it. I'm not saying some black pill shit here, but I am saying they've gotten to the point where they're incorporating it now. They've probably been incorporating it for a while. So, you know, that whole thing is maybe a good example of that. It's like you either have the left-leaning ideology or the right-leaning ideology, but should you have watched an episode of Conspiracy Theorists with Jesse Ventura in 2009, you might think that this thing was coming down the path. And so we've got something for you too. You're going to avoid the experts. And so we'll just give you other experts, and they'll tell you what to do, you know, to supersede these systems that are being put in place. And then you'll end up self-diagnosing and doing SSRIs.
This has like biblical reference as well. Something I was reading recently in 1 Samuel. It's not the first iterance of this, but it is interesting when you look at it. Samuel was the prophet, and at the time Israel was run by the prophets. Basically, like they were the judges rather than a king. His sons were in the temple and they became corrupt, which I guess happens. And the people saw that, and they're given the situation, or they're given a predicament in which they feel like they have to choose. So they go, we want a king. And Samuel goes to God and he says, they want a king. They've rejected you. And he goes, all right, let them know these are the consequences. Their daughters will be concubines, maid servants. Their sons will be on the front lines of his army and slaves. And he goes back and he tells them, and they go, yeah, we want that though. Like, they're pushed in a way, and I don't know what was going on with his sons and the corruption that was going on, but it's very similar. And the people have a choice now, and it's probably this weird left-right dynamic. But we've got to make a choice. We got to move because they're up against time and they're up against what's happening, and I get it. So they choose, and you know, it's almost futility at this point. Like we're always up. It's either like action or inaction. And I'm a fan of action. I don't particularly like inaction, but there is no good choice. If that makes any sense. Is that like a black pill notion?
I don't think that's a black pill, because the Bible, it's like we're dealing with the world, and what does the Bible say about the world? And I think if you look at that, there's a lot of guidance in that. How to deal with the world. You know, we're strangers in a foreign land passing through. Okay.
But the reality is we're in it.
No,
right?
yeah. And so, which is why it's like over and over again.
Got to choose.
Well, not just that. Pretty clever.
Yeah. That's the
good job boxing us into a corner.
Yeah, and we can continually have to choose. Like I voted for Trump last time, but hey, man, thanks, you got me. We got to, like, who am I choosing? Right? What were my choices here?
Well, it's not over, because they're doing the trust the plan shit.
It's a lot.
They're doing the QAnon shit.
So technically, I won.
Very fun.
Dude, it's
very fun.
Honestly, I think it's so interesting because I think it was my episode 24. I think it was the Agenda 21, right? Is what I was basically discussing, and the concept of the confessions of an economic hitman and all of this. And I basically realized that throughout that process, much of what they rely on is this Delphi method, which is allegedly an appeal to authority, right? And that's really I mean, it seems like the Delphi method or the technique, which was developed by the Rand Corporation post-war, right, post World War II, in the 1950s, the same time they're creating and implementing the foundation of the Monarch project and these more sinister sub projects of MK Ultra involving human honeypots and child prostitutes and that's when Claudia Mullen was tasked with right, and the other girl were tasked with this effectively compromising Frank Church during the committee hearings, which is when you realize that a human honeypot child prostitute was sent by Alan Dulles and Sidney Gottlieb to compromise the individual who's legitimately in charge of transparency to the public, as far as the
I mean, that's the guy to go after.
Man, yeah, that's the guy to go after. But my God, they're training up these children on these remote Deer Creek cabin black sites and things on how to sexually pleasure their priority targets, and then also how to draw information from them as pillow talk in a sort of way. But
and then what we're doing on top of that is turning it into really fantastic works of fiction that you get to sit home and watch and enjoy and then go on into the real world and associate any utterance of those elements with just works of fiction that you've seen. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, it makes
Stranger
anybody
Things,
point
man.
it out. Yeah, Stranger Things. They do that really well in Avengers, or Black Widow is part of this elite assassin group who's taken as children and raised up in espionage and everything. And
Here's a really fun one about Stranger Things that we missed with Wes. One of the weapons that they're using against Eleven and the other telepathic people are these like large frequency weapons that are aimed at the children, and they freak out, like their noses bleed and they can't do
But it
anything.
only works on the psychic kids, right? It doesn't do that to like the regular kids.
Well, check this out. In the New York Post, there's an article about the invasion in Venezuela. Did you read this?
No.
It's insane.
How cool is it? It's kind of cool.
Did you read that?
I didn't read it. I heard like an overview of it. Really awesome.
So it's a testimony from one of the Venezuelan guards, and he was like, basically, like, we saw some drones, and then we saw a couple helicopters, and it wasn't a big deal because there was like only 20 of them or something. And we were like, yeah, we got this. And all of a sudden, everyone's just crippled on the floor. He's like, these dudes came in, he said, with technology or some sort of armor that they've never seen before. And it sounds like they're using frequency technology.
He said they were throwing up blood
And bleeding from the ears. And they came in and they said it was a massacre. And he said, this could also be a propaganda piece.
True.
But
I think we have the technology.
That's Havana syndrome, man. That is literally Havana syndrome, right?
I think we dialed it in though a little bit.
Apparently, that's South America because we keep doing it there. But yeah, we went in there, and it's really interesting because that's what they were using.
Well, what did he say? Right? What was his parting words? Were like,
"Don't fuck
with America. Do not with America. You don't understand what they have. You cannot win this fight." Like that was basically his sentiments on the other end of it. So could be propaganda,
but it's also one of those things where it's like presented like this soft disclosure on a TV show, and then it's like boom, then we use it 2 weeks later. I'm like,
that's interesting.
What just happened here?
That's a great observation. Yeah, because they apparently had it in the 90s in fictional Stranger Things. So
I think they used it in Waco as well. I think the audio and resonance warfare was legitimately there was an internal a document that was an intelligence document that was a report from the KGB, right, from the Russian intelligence, and essentially it was because there were all these various foreign intelligence assets that were on the ground at Waco during the final siege, and I think that was all about it was basically a learning experience of what happens when we greenlight an operation such as this, and how we will effectively respond in this way. And they gassed all those people who were remaining in the compound with a nerve agent that made them paralyzed, and so they couldn't even flee. And the reason they were constricted in like this what's it called? It was basically the Jonestown effect, right? Where what was the poison? Damn it! But either way, it twists and contorts your spinal, like as you die, right? You have this visceral and violent physical reaction to it, and it's very obvious, right? So when anyone is essentially like the medical reports are being taken and things of that nature, and then they'll obviously be identifiable as they died of this specific poison agent. Which has been used so many different times in the past that they can rely on this. But anyway,
Well, I
I
wanted to
just
say this really quick before we move on, though. Retardo Genio says, I forgot this was an element of it. They said they were getting off 300 rounds per
Right.
minute. That's what it sounded like. And 20 American soldiers laid waste to 200 men.
my God.
200 men, and they used frequency and somehow whatever they were shooting, 300 rounds per minute is what it
That is
sounded
a
like.
massacre.
That's
You know that
crazy.
the new Naked Gun movie, right? Like I I
Yeah.
watched it because because Sam and Brad said it was funny. So I watched it last night, right? And I just had it on super late, and you know, there were funny moments. It was ridiculous, but the strange plot though, I felt was very valuable, and it was basically that you had this criminal organization of elite billionaires who essentially wanted to create a new Eden. Okay,
Yep.
and what would they do? They would greenlight this EMF technology, which would essentially utilize the widespread of this trigger mechanism through smartphone devices and various other, you know, electronic devices that each and every one of us possess, and they would then cause this inherent violent reaction by triggering the most right, just what's the term, like the as far as just the violent kind of visceral reaction from right, the human reaction would be triggered as far as like the violent capacity, right, of to engage without considering the outcome in a sort of sense. It would just trigger this neurological avenue and pathway in the brain to where you would just engage in complete right, and utter violence with no questions attached or yeah, moral, yeah, concerns whatsoever. It just kind of I don't know, slapped me in the face as far as how much they like to play revelation of the method and
Yeah.
introduce these concepts to the general public through pop culture, you know,
Well, the way that
vessels or
Top said it was like that thing just aired, dude.
Mhm.
That season of Stranger Things just aired, and then
Of
all of a
course.
sudden we see the
It's like
implementation of the very same technology on the world stage.
it's like the Mountain Dew of Netflix,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It's not just that we see it. We see it on for its time, the biggest event that unfolded on the world stage was us and Venezuela, and that's where you see this thing take place.
Mhm.
And somebody in the chat, I think it was Elohim, said, "Yeah, how did they develop this tech? Imagine the countless test subjects, dude. That's you know." It's almost a moot point because it's, you know, it's nothing but like blackfilling. But honestly, if you think about that for a second, it, generations of MK Ultra operations, people stolen off the streets. You know, at one point the government admits to taking how many for the MK Ultra program? 10,000 orphans. 10,000 orphans is what they admitted to taking. And those kids were subjected to frequency warfare, no doubt, to develop these technologies that are being implemented right now. So
They said
yeah,
Eric
it's
Harris apparently endured very similar techniques of behavioral modification experimentation on Plattsburgh, and you know, just as far as finishing the point I was making about the detective sheriff's deputy Tim Walsh and the alleged sexual abuse happening to Eric and Dylan leading up to the event. They were placed in a juvenile diversion program right in '98, just months before they carried out the attack on the high school, and they had to pretty much not only respond and right, as far as just go in and meet with their it was sort of like a probationary period that they were under, so they had interactions with these investigators and police officers, and I just found it interesting because they break into a van like a few months prior to the shooting, and they get caught up with this specific sheriff's deputy, which tended to respond to every single criminal claim or report that surrounded specifically Eric Harris, which I found interesting, and so
like a
yeah,
handler or something like
it
that.
felt like it, yeah, and especially considering that he was potentially the individual who was the perpetrator who sexually abused them. It makes sense. I think they might have had police protection as far as facilitating the drug trafficking operation. Even the subway shop murders that happened just a block or 2 blocks from Columbine, like 10 months after the shooting. It was 2 students who were effectively murdered who survived the shooting that day, and it was actually her sister who had been the first killed. Rachel Scott, I think, was her name, but either way, this girl and her boyfriend were shot to death in the subway shop, like at after 1 a.m. or something around there is when their bodies were found. I think it was after midnight, and it was supposedly the lights were still on, and somebody drove past and saw and went in and found the bodies, who was a member of the staff. But what they had technically discovered through this investigation is that you had over 50 unrelated cases, is what they claimed, but 50 other investigative, as far as cases within Jefferson County, the sheriff's office, that were claiming that essentially the subway shop was a part of a major drug distribution operation, and that actually this is what essentially happened was that so the first thing that I thought was, okay, this applies directly to Blackjack
Wait,
Pizza,
when you say
obviously.
Subway, Subway
Yeah.
shop, like a Subway, like a sandwich shop,
Yeah,
A
right? What you
chain
say?
or
exactly.
just sandwiches?
Just a chain, yeah, it was the chain restaurant, but obviously you had mostly students from Columbine who were operating the actual shop, but um,
Ugh,
yeah,
man,
it's
that does sound very
fascinating.
familiar to
Mhm.
the pizza shop.
Exactly. And so if there's no way around it, that they're not limiting this kind of the strategic nature of the playbook to one operational yeah.
No,
uh,
if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If it works, just
exactly.
keep doing it. Yeah, keep going
Mhm.
to the well.
Yeah, and
Well,
that's why I think they were, like, legitimately blowing up dry ice bombs in the bathroom at Blackjack and stuff like that, and it's crazy, they were, they even would all these members of the TCM, the Trenchcoat Mafia, would meet at Blackjack, and then they would go out
wait,
and
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just remembered that Jared from Subway gets popped for child, pornography or whatever.
Yep.
This like, do you think at some point they let him in on the whole thing? Like, we're gonna use your sandwich shop to traffic not only probably meth and other things,
Mhm.
but children, humans.
Yep.
And then is it any coincidence that he, the mascot, gets popped for pedophilic content or whatever? I
Right?
don't know what context. I don't know if he assaulted anybody, or I never really looked at that case too much, but
He seemed like I don't know. I don't know if there was like hard evidence. It just seemed like a guy that they wanted to like what they did to the Papa John guy.
you know what
Just
you
kind of want
do.
him out. I don't know.
Well, you know what it does do.
Interesting.
The same way when you type in Disney
Ah,
Frozen.
blurs the lines.
Now, when you type in Subway child anything, you're just gonna get Jared.
Mm.
You're not gonna get that the shop was ever wrapped up in some nefarious trafficking shit.
100%. Yeah, and honestly,
Damn.
the mounting death toll of not only Columbine students who would inevitably be, I believe, snuffed out as far as just as kind of loose ends, but you had members of their families, right? Like you had parents who were strangely found murdered. One of them actually went into a pawn shop, and she basically purchased a weapon and then proceeded to shoot herself and at the counter in front of the pawn shop owner. And
How do you
yeah,
do that? They don't sell you loaded weapons.
exactly.
Would you have
That's
ammunition in your pockets and loaded the magazine? Every pawn shop I've ever been to, they're all armed. Nobody
exactly
would let you. There's cameras everywhere. They'd put you down before you ever got a chance to
Well, I mean,
sink around into a magazine.
they
right.
might might not be looking because you're just so used to
I mean, that's all you need, I
unloading.
guess, is like one bullet in your pocket, and then you can kind of fish it into the magazine. And but
Mm.
man, I don't know. The whole thing
Depends
sounds
on the gun. I mean, if it's a revolver, you just put it in, spin it, and bang, that's it, right?
shit, man.
I'm telling you, it's honestly
Sounds
just
unlikely.
yeah, that was the biggest question as far as trying to figure out how she even went about doing this. Like, did the pawn shop owner provide her with the bullets, or did she actually bring the bullets in herself and had this premeditated, plan? But yeah, if you look it up, there's a New York Post article that directly references this. Columbine High School victim's mom kills herself. This was October 23rd, 1999. So the mother of a teenager paralyzed in the Columbine High School massacre walked into a pawn shop, asked to see a handgun, and blew her brains out yesterday. Carla June Hochhalter, a 48-year-old elementary school teacher. So I'm interested to know which elementary school,
Which
because there was an elementary school in Columbine where most of the students and survivors were sent to after
right?
when all of the chaos was unfolding, and so yeah, you have just 6 months after the event takes place and her 17-year-old daughter is paralyzed, she commits suicide. And
See, but
yeah,
like it becomes stranger too when you start thinking about who doesn't own a gun but has ammunition.
right.
If it was
She
just one
loaded the
bullet,
gun. It says that all that it says in the paperwork is that the clerk turned around to fill out the paperwork. Miss Holkalter loaded the gun and fired one round that hit the wall and a second bullet into her head.
what? So she had two bullets in her pocket that she managed to. I mean, look, for somebody who doesn't own a gun, to be able to successfully load the magazine of a pistol, if it is, a semi-automatic pistol, is it's not an easy task necessarily. You could probably fumble it around a little bit before so she gets both of them in cleanly before anybody notices that she's doing this. She's a school teacher. It doesn't seem like she would have a history of being sneaky. I mean, if and name anybody that's going to do that, you'd look pretty conspicuous. And when you're dealing with firearms, usually, they give a shit a little bit more. If you're just buying a Sawzall or something from a pawn shop, maybe there's not going to be too many eyes on you. You're purchasing a firearm. You have the firearm in your hand. I imagine that some of these people are going to be looking at you. If you don't own one, it suggests you don't have a lot of experience loading rounds into a magazine. You would have had to have known to buy, if you had 9mm rounds in your pocket, to buy a 9mm. There's a little bit of, it's a strange thing for somebody. It's a woman. It's an elementary school teacher. She doesn't own a gun.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. This article that I just pulled up here, I don't know if I'm burying the lead for you here, Austin, but
So, buddy.
all right. So the mother, the daughter of the person who committed suicide, this is who I thought we were looking at. Her name is Anne Marie Hochhalter.
Yep.
She just died this in 2025.
The
Did you get
daughter?
into that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
man. I'm
no,
like,
you're
what am I
good.
This
looking
is the
at?
daughter of the lady that
Yeah,
did it?
yeah. I pulled up an article and I'm like, I'm confused. What are they talking about? She lived till 2025.
The
But
vegetable?
yeah, go ahead, Austin. Take it.
I think that honestly it's fascinating as far as the level of death surrounding Columbine in general, and especially following Columbine. But yeah, she's basically fully paralyzed for the most part. But then she inevitably dies recently, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a strange form of I think it was sepsis, right?
You said
Complicated
sepsis due to
Yeah.
the bullets that she took it 26
during
years ago.
Columbine.
What?
Yeah,
What?
during
that's-
Columbine. Which how do you die of sepsis 26 years? Right.
Yeah.
Apart from the actual.
The coroner ruled it a death due to homicide linked to the attack 26 years ago.
What?
Yeah,
Add
no,
to the
that's
death
just like,
toll, baby.
Dude, that's weird.
Mhm.
damn, that's called long.
Yeah. Oh my
That's
God.
crazy, bro.
It's too much.
Damn.
Long Columbine.
Amen. They
That
call it the
long
Columbine
Columbine.
effect, right? And
Oh
it
my
definitely
God.
seems like it's long standing. And I feel like just after like focusing on all the different loopholes and obvious rabbit holes and threads that are connected to Columbine specifically, man, I felt like I suffered from my own personal Columbine effect almost. It was interesting just because.
What a weird time for you to be researching this, right? As soon as she,
Yep.
damn, dude.
I'm telling you, that happens. It's like when I did the Pizzagate episode, and then Edgar Madison Welch gets murdered by in a routine traffic stop, and he wasn't even driving by the
Damn.
officer. I'm like, how did this happen, right? But
That's a
but
weird thing
nobody
too, because
can
it doesn't feel like it's a tying up of loose ends. 25, 26 years later, you would think if she had anything to say, she would have said it and you weren't in any danger of like the official narrative
Exactly.
getting screwed with. It feels more like a looshing or something like that, like
Does.
to add to the body count of Columbine to rule it a homicide from the Columbine shooting.
It's kind of like some sort of numbers that keep getting inflated every year.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, we got to get these numbers up, dude. Not enough people are traumatized about this event. Maybe one more will do it.
It's weird.
That is nuts. That's
Mhm.
nuts. Well, look, Austin, I don't know if this is an appropriate segue. If you have more to say on the topic, feel free. But I do want to get to this because we're talking about the Subway shop and I'm looking at some of the notes here, and I would feel terrible if we didn't get to the Pizzagate turning point connections. Is it a fair time to segue, or do you have more on that?
I mean, we totally can, because honestly, I could, yeah, if we legitimately wanted to go through every last detail of what I discovered throughout the Columbine
The episode
research and
4.
investigation, yeah, exactly. It would I could probably spend 6 hours straight talking about this case, and it does seem like, just as far as I do think it's interesting that. You had these Arapahoe County sheriff's officers and these various Jefferson County deputies who were apparently, involved as patrolmen in the Littleton Police Department and had essentially at one point Ron Anye, the child victims advocate who claimed that Eric Harris was sexually assaulted, talks about how essentially Sheriff Sullivan from Arapahoe County served as sheriff from 84 to 2002 and was very highly respected until he was arrested for trading meth for in 2011. And I
Meth for
thought, ding, ding, ding. There we go, baby. We get another window into, were you potentially involved with the methamphetamine distribution process throughout the Littleton area at this time that directly coincided with that of, the Blackjack Pizza restaurant and the Subway shop murders that obviously centered around that of Columbine as well. It's hard to just, it's hard to separate these things. And
Dude, they're doing meth. They're possessed by demons, and they're doing ritual magic, and
Yes.
and they're doing it in a way that is inducing trauma on children to create dissociative states, to then create programmable personalities that emerge, or any number of things. It's the same shit every time.
Exactly. And I think just the connection to the bloodletting ceremonies of the specific chapter of the Trenchcoat Mafia that Eric Harris was and Dylan Klebold were partying with at these house parties leading up to the shooting happening. And now I think that was a direct geographical hub and avenue for procuring potential child victims on behalf of the network as assets. They could essentially, at any point in time, isolate and identify which individuals would be of most in terms of value for the operation that I think Columbine really became. And I think that's why there were a couple teams of shooters. And I think that, the actual, if you look at, the SWAT team that were legitimately, they're shooting up the school after the killers are allegedly dead. And they're still shooting blindly into the cafeteria when you have children and students who are still survivors hiding underneath the tables. And and then also you have multiple parents claiming and going on the record suing specific individuals of the police department. You have one officer who responded to the scene, one of the first on the scene, who told the parents specifically of Daniel Rohrbaugh that they actually saw one of his fellow officers shoot him in cold blood when he was running out, fleeing from the shooting out of the school. He flees and he runs out to the sidewalk and gets shot down in cold blood. And they later on changed the official narrative to match what they wanted in terms of where his body was found, which they claimed was actually at the bottom of the staircase leading up to the exit. That's not true. And
Dude,
it's just,
this is the thing that drives me nuts, because obviously there's always layers of narrative for the normies, for the left, for the right, for the conspiracy theorists, but the ones for the normies and the ones for the left and the right, which is redundant, are so damaging, because you're having arguments about Second Amendment rights. You're having arguments about a mental health crisis. You're having arguments about SSRIs, which is almost kind of close, right? And then if you look into the cultural impact of it, you're having arguments between black crime statistics and why do white kids shoot up so many schools.
But look at, I mean,
And
again,
it's like, dude, you're arguing about the wrong shit.
if we're looking at like the current Christian model of national Christianity, we're arguing about how we're going to punish those people for being victims to this. So it's like none of this
dude.
shit is addressing what's actually happening.
Yeah.
right.
The workings underneath. I think they have some spiritual tendrils to them. But that's
it's massive spiritual tendrils. I mean, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with kids that are, on the surface, they're shooting up schools. looks real bad. You dig a little bit, they're victims of meth-induced rape.
Mhm.
And when you look at who's doing it, connections to military intelligence,
Guy with crazy eyebrows.
and
like,
Satanism,
Yeah.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so there's
Michael
satanic
Aquino, yeah.
forces sexually, ritually assaulting these children while on meth and possessed by entities.
Yep.
What the? And you, dude, you can't even have that. The school shooting thing is a really excellent psyop in that if you even try to have that conversation with a normie, that's too far gone.
because
And we
you're
want to talk
having it
about aliens.
on a pile of dead kids.
Yeah.
You can't have that conversation.
You can't have that conversation on a pile of dead kids.
I've tried.
it's legitimately the third rail, and I think that's by design in a
Yeah.
way, and they want you to feel the taboo nature of just possessing the willingness to discuss these high impact events, specifically the events that affect children in this sinister way. But let alone the notion that obviously I believe that we have this strange formula that's been very well sophisticated. And I think whenever you see, not only do you have this fascinating, unique brand of programming that applies directly to some of these more valuable assets, I think it's the understanding of the behavioral modification programs that I think was the main thing I wanted to at least mention as far as Eric Harris, right? Because I do think that it's far more likely that he was the individual who was most successfully conditioned and programmed and set and placed into position for this very purpose, and then kind of brought Dylan into him, is how it's described. And Dylan basically started to reflect much of the characteristics that Eric possessed, but it felt as if Eric was almost tasked with providing some secondary perpetrator that would then fall into place as a suggestible and vulnerable psychology that they could manipulate into essentially just following suit. Because this is the reason why I believe you have essentially, just as far as when you look at Dylan, like he wrote this strange portion in his journal, his personal diary, and it felt like I was reading the writings of someone who's suffering from dissociative identity disorder. Like that is legitimately what it felt like. And
Felt like a Catcher in the Rye.
it really did. It felt like this is some kind of mind control manual, and at certain points, it feels like he's maybe even waking up to his programming in a certain way. But he talks about hypnotism at one point, which I thought was fascinating, obviously, because not only do you have the indications of Eric Harris being legitimately exposed and programmed and conditioned through sexual trauma and things of that nature. I think it's also very interesting that clearly you have Dylan Klebold providing us with a window into the psychology of just kind of that he possessed leading up to the shooting. And that in itself was really shocking, right? Because again, we have Eric Harris's glowing family background, right, involved with military intelligence, and then you also have that strange crossroads that we covered in the previous episode on 9/11 and Columbine, which is just fascinating. And then you also have Dylan being a part of the CHIPS program, right, which is just absolutely crazy as far as realizing this is a gifted program in a way, right? And that's it seemed as if this was just once again another window into how they legitimately will isolate and identify just legitimate possible and potential assets moving forward in this clandestine way. But the strange dissociative journal entry came with obviously his personal diaries, which they read like a textbook manifestation of essentially the way that I described it in my episode. I wrote, it was the textbook manifestation of unrepentant evil incarnate, embodying pure malevolence without remorse or the desire for redemption. And that is legitimately what it seems like they exposed through the pages of their journals and diary entries. But one of Dylan's, basically, when I was reading through it, it does seem like he was possessing a dissociative psychological state of mind, while composing the text. And so it's on page 5, where he wrote May 7th, 1997. He titled the journal entry as "My Thoughts Shit." And he said, "Yo, what's up? He. Know what's weird? Everyone knows everyone. I swear, like I'm an outcast, and everyone is conspiring against me. Check it. This isn't good, but I need to write, so here. Within the known limits of time, within the conceived boundaries of space, the average human thinks these are the settings of existence. Yet the ponderer, the outcast, the believer, helps out the human. Think not of 2 dimensions, says the ponderer, but of 3. As your world is conceived of 3 dimensions, so is mine. While you explore the immediate physical boundaries of your body, you see in your 3 dimensions L, W, and H. Yet I, who is more mentally open to anything, see my 3 dimensions, my realm of thought, time, space, and thought. Thought is the most powerful thing that exists. Anything conceivable can be produced. Anything and everything is possible, even in your physical world. After this so-called lecture, the common man feels confused, empty, and unaware. Yet those are the best emotions of a ponderer. The real difference is a true ponderer will explore these emotions and what caused them. Another, a dream. Miles and miles of never-ending grass, like a wheat, a farm, sunshine, a happy feeling in the presence. Absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing ever is. Contrary 180 degrees to normal life. No awareness, just pure bliss, unexplainable bliss. The only challenges are no challenge. And then, sketch of a wall. Bam! Realization sets in. The world is the greatest punishment. Life. Hypnosis place. It is a sky with one large cloud and sort of a cloud-made chair. The sun is at the end of the chair. 10 o'clock up into the sky. Below, I sometimes see mist and the green, great green earth, sort of a city, yet I hear nothing. I relax on this chair, actually like a chase, and I am talking. To what? I don't know. It's just there. I have the feeling that I know him, even though I consciously don't. And we talk like we are the same person, like he's my soul. And I just thought, look, it's strange, right? Obviously, very, very unique, and as far as reading through the journal. But he goes into a sketch of a thought box, and he says the everlasting contrast. And I thought you would appreciate this: dark, light, God, Lucifer, heaven, hell, good, bad. Yes, the everlasting contrast. Since existence has known, the fight between good and evil has continued. Obviously, this fight can never end. Good things turn bad, bad things become good. The people on the earth see it as a battle they can win. Fucking morons. If people looked at history, they would see what happens. I think I think too much. I understand. I am God compared to some of these unexistable, brainless zombies. Yet the
I can't
actions of
stand
them
nihilism.
interest me, right? Like a kid with a new toy. Another contrast, more of a paradox, actually. Like the advanced go for the undeveloped realm, while some of the morons become everything dwellers, but exceptions to every rule. And this is a big exception. Most morons never change. They never decide to live in the everything frame of mind. So he could just be, you know, I felt like the hypnosis place was almost out of context. It was so strange reading through this. And I did feel like if you're because the notion is you potentially as you're waking up from your programming, you dream, you have nightmares of recovered memories. And and so these memories that you're recovering are essentially memories of your programming. And so
Mm.
various layers will be removed as far as trigger mechanisms in place for your handlers to activate. And that's interesting to me. So I just think that if you consider the notion that obviously I believe that Eric Harris was legitimately abused and sexually traumatized, right?
Yeah.
But you combine that with the Plattsburgh mind control techniques that I think he endured. It was basically Plattsburgh, it's so strange because it became it now is a civilian airport and an industrial complex basically, and it's operated by the Plattsburgh Air Base Development Authority. So Plattsburgh Air Force Base had a significant underground facility, often referred to as the mole hole, and it was designed to house crews on alert as far as alert duty for intercontinental ballistic missile operations during the Cold War. So you have this facility including multiple levels, part of the base's strategic defense infrastructure is what they claimed. And so basically beneath the Plattsburgh base is this vast 18 level deep subterranean facility. And Eric Harris, whose father had been linked to covert Air Force intelligence projects going back nearly 20 years, right? He lived with his family, Eric and Wayne, at the Air Force Base for over 4 years, right before moving to Littleton, Colorado. So it had been confirmed that the Plattsburgh base was long used as a location for severe, scientifically very advanced mind consciousness manipulation technologies, and obviously these clandestine projects from many different sources, including victims even, right, who claim that they endured this brand of programming at the base specifically, and even individual whistleblowers who were employed as project operators on base. And so some of the reports even claim to link the 1960s apparently one of the key MK Ultra operatives who helped export the Montreal experiments, right? The MK Ultra exported to Canada, essentially, right? And that was Dr. Ewan Cameron, who created he's the sinister mind behind the infamous psychic driving technique, right? Which is and he was also the president of the American Psychiatric Association.
Man, I can't like, dude, I'll never look at, especially after our early episodes on this, because episode 1 in particular, than your other appearances on the show. I cannot look at the mental health professionals as anything other than basically a cloak. Yeah, because right now they're under a guise. The mask that they're wearing is mental health professionals. But when you find out like when they started to become a thing and what it was all associated, I look at them more as just what would you call them? People that separate things. Like if you have a production line, it's like green goes into here, red goes into here.
Yeah, they should be wearing like a hairnet as they separate people.
Exactly. People into viable pawns for some sort of psychological warfare. That's it. That's what their job is.
Are you saying, I'm sorry, was this guy treated in this dumb base, the underground base?
So
By
basically,
treated, you mean DF?
Well, he was there. You have evidence linking him to being there. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and by the way, I think it's important to know that obviously he was described as a typical kid, right? There's a interesting article that I wrote about, or not wrote, but read about. It's called "Plattsburgh Recalls a Typical Kid," and it was from the Burlington Free Press, April 23rd, 1999, and it was just after the shooting. So they were basically covering the background of Eric, and they were trying to provide some kind of starting point in a way. And basically, Eric lived on the U.S. Air Force Base in Plattsburgh, New York, near the Canadian border between 93 and 96. So, by the way, Plattsburgh shut down in 94. So very interesting that he's still living on the military base with his father for 2 additional years before he goes.
Stuff that when you're operating there, you can go under the guise of
it's like a blackout.
It's already been
site
shut
now.
down. There's nothing is happening here. It's inactive. It's like
Exactly, and that's what they claim. What's that?
I want to mention before you continue is that like so you're describing Eric's journal, and I guess his I don't know what you'd call it, his trip into the supernatural, the astral. What he's describing what sounds like the Hill at first. So it's like, it's crazy when they're put into these situations, or when they're put into these conditions, they actually do see the spiritual, but he's convinced of this other side.
Yeah.
Where he eventually, like towards the end of that journal entry, he folds into like, I am God.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, he's black pilling. He's saying there's really no way out of this. And in a sense, he's kind of
That's it. It's the ultimate Gnosticism thing. This is the problem with having no wisdom but getting exposed to
Like the
information.
truth. Like
Yeah.
he see, I firmly believe that he did see all of this stuff
Yeah.
on the other side of this veil, where and he's telling people, he's like, yo, you guys don't even know what we're dealing with
And
here.
that's the shit right there. These idiots, they don't even know I'm the one, X, Y, and Z. That's the big slope of being a conspiracy theorist. We all fall victim to that sometimes. Like, look at these sheep. They don't know shit. And then
Right.
where do you end up? It's either I am God or God is evil.
Well, that leaves you open to the, I guess, the deception of like falling off that cliff, because now I'm the one privy to this information. Therefore, I know. Therefore, I'm God. And then once you're kind of there, they can play with you however they want. So I'm watching this. I'm watching them go down that rabbit hole. It's just fascinating. I guess
Yeah.
people would read that and just say, "Oh, this guy's delusional."
Right.
I don't think he's delusional. I think he's experiencing something real, and he's just giving you a great example of what he's seen.
I agree. And I think that the self-deification, right, and this superior intellect of some kind is built into occultism in a way, in this
Yeah.
new age ideology, which I saw that in the Temple of Set with Michael Aquino as the founder, who leaves has a falling out with Anton LaVey after being a key prominent member in the Church of Satan. And then, this is all while he's head of the PSYOP war doctrine, psychological warfare operational doctrine that they're implementing, I think, in this post-war modern gladio sort of context. But the point being is that, what did he train and condition into the Setian members, right? In the Temple of Set, they talked about the divine black flame and the self-deification process of the individual, and how essentially you would become your own god in the context of the Temple of Set and becoming a Setian worshiper, and understanding this higher intellect, which they called the black flame, which was deep within you, but you had to be able to essentially acknowledge it, identify it, and then self-deify it in your own right, and follow this strange occult path to immortality in a way, which really does fall perfectly in place with that of the modern mass shooter, and how often they seem to reflect on these Nordic belief systems as well, that seem to very much present this you are almost immortalized through the action of committing mass violence in this way, and therefore you will live on in this. And also, I believe it's almost a sense of you gain prisoners and followers for the afterlife. It's almost in the vein of some of the Islamic interpretations of things, obviously, as far as this strange procurement of slaves in the afterlife, which it does look as if they were seeking a form of immortality through the level of violence that they're obviously engaging in. But my dog's freaking out. I'm gonna have to let her out. Can I
Sure,
do
go
that
ahead,
real
let her
quick?
out. I
And
wanna-
then we'll actually, okay. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I want to kick around some stuff with Top right now anyway. So this idea of the black flame is parallel or synonymous, maybe is a better way to say, because they do converge with the divine feminine, the goddess.
Interesting. How so?
Well, so here we go. It has to do with obviously like the dark. All right, so it signifies potential before form, power before expression, womb fire rather than hearth fire. I never know how to pronounce that. And across these different ancient systems, the feminine principle governs darkness, gestation, the unseen, things of that nature.
Yeah, chaos.
So you have Hecate, which is a torch bearer. Her flame is not solar, it's chthonic. I don't know what that means, but it's a goddess of the underworld, right? Then you have Isis, who has resurrection power, hidden in darkness, the underworld. So travels through black fire in the underworld before rebirth is what the sun does in Egypt. And she is, Isis is, what is it? Resurrective power. Okay, I see how it is. So Isis represents resurrective power hidden in darkness. The sun travels through the underworld through black fire. So that's the way in which they're associated with. Kali, which is interesting. Where the hell do we see Kali recently?
Kali is coming from Stranger Things as well.
Yes, that's right. Blackness, right? Destruction and liberation, fire of dissolution that returns the creation to source.
Mhm.
So all of these female entities have an association with some sort of fire that is representative of the underworld or destruction. And in that way, the black flame seems to be the same energy as what people are, claiming the divine feminine is. So that
Interesting.
is because I was wondering, why I was looking at an image today of maybe I could pull it up here. I just thought it was weird that she was depicted this way, but there's this image from Anderson Cooper's mother,
Wow.
a childhood photo. Let me bring it up real quick.
The kids in the pool.
No, not that one. Image in a new tab. So here, let's I'll put this on
Anderson
the screen.
Vanderbilt, isn't that the one you're talking about?
Perhaps. Hold on, wait. Let me
And
bring
again,
this up real quick.
sodomy having something to do with
No,
this.
he wasn't sodomized. Don't-
Well,
that's crazy.
willingly.
Perhaps. Okay, so it says, remember when Anderson Cooper released these pictures from his childhood,
Holy
and him and
shit.
his mom are sitting under the depiction of Jesus being burned in a sacrifice to Moloch. But I was
Dude, I
talking about
never
how,
saw this, brother.
yes, it's fucking crazy.
Is that above his bed?
That's not Moloch. That's the divine feminine. Nothing
That's
about that is Moloch. Look at it. It's a like some sort of pale inverted image of Mary. It's much more similar to the Elan, what is it? Something Danter.
Elizante Danter.
Yeah, that P. Diddy has tattooed on his back. So you have these angels flanking on either side. Jesus is on an altar. It looks to be shrouded in flames. So it's some sort of sacrifice. And who is it sacrificing to? But some female entity, pale of face, sort of representing like Mother Mary, only like 3 times the size of both Jesus and the angels.
Yeah, the Queen of Heaven.
Yeah, so I think that there is some connection here. I was thinking about the black flame just in regards to how she's all shrouded in black, and then there's flames on the altar. But I think these things are connected. This black flame and this divine feminine, I think, are there's an overlap there. But so go ahead and pick up where you left off, Austin.
Yeah, I just, man, whenever you look into it, it's basically Setians believe that Set is the one real God, and that he has aided humanity by giving them a questioning intellect, the quote black flame, which distinguishes them from other animal species. Set is held in high esteem as a teacher whose example is to be emulated, but he is not worshipped as a deity. So that is where the individualism plays into the self-deification and utilizing black magic, which he claimed was a term. Michael Aquino claimed that black magic, because Setians describe the practice of black magic openly, right? And he claims that the term he defined as idiosyncratically, which I thought was interesting. This guy is clearly, he's talking about how the temple promotes the idea that practitioners should seek self-deification and thus attain an immortality of consciousness. So that just plays into right, this occult connotation in the context of how they really empower the minds of really as far as the more evil centric as far as what they're attempting to evoke from the personal individual, right, is essentially highlight and obviously, I think it's a level of, obviously they are somewhat conditioning themselves to embrace this strange self-deification process, which I do find to be, honestly, it's a ruse, right? It's basically this process of denying God, right? Of denying your mortality as well, which I think is a gift from God, right? That should be considered as precious, and in every way we should attempt to obviously reflect on how special this time is in terms of just not knowing exactly what will happen at the end of this, as far as just you can have whatever conclusion and concept of the afterlife you want, but the bottom line is we don't know what it'll look like. At the very least, it's like, you know what I mean, it's nothing is set in stone and sure enough to be relied upon as far as a direct expectation, other than hopefully there is a heaven and hell, a sort of thing, right? It's beyond that, I think, in terms of just what they are emboldening the occult member to effectively be willing to push forward, which is
This
this
is the same thing you
destruction.
see it. Crowley did the same thing in Thelema.
Hmm.
This sort of like do what thou wilt, be your own God. But there was also this idea of not the refining fire. There was this the initiating fire,
Hmm.
and which was like, I guess you could look at it as a way of saying like enlightened to kind of hidden information. In that way, the flame represents an enlightening, but it's like it's the same shit all the time. It's like the Prometheus thing, right? I mean, that's
Oh
how it's
man.
often framed. Whenever you're bringing hidden knowledge to mankind, it's usually depicted as a flame, as a fire. And then that always leads to anything but God, either like
Right.
we've been talking about self-deification, or worshiping some other fallen entity like the one that brought you the flame or whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's a constant theme in all of this.
Right. And I think I started my episode on this with a quote from Bill Cooper's "Behold a Pale Horse," obviously, and I think that you know I try to discern for myself how trustworthy one Bill Cooper is, and
Mm.
obviously it's a discernment process in terms of all of these, assessing the credibility of all of these sources, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I will say it does seem like the false disclosure aspect of providing someone with misinformation or disinformation in order to, and coming from a source that you deem is reliable enough to go out there and parrot that information, and then
Yeah.
therefore you find yourself in this unfortunate circumstance where your credibility has been damaged, and therefore you're now questionable in terms of your trustworthy from here on out, and forever people will point to that example as, well, I don't know, Bill Cooper said this or that, right? And maybe I don't know, maybe it's the over, I don't know. Oh, geez, I just heard myself. I'm sorry. It freaked me out. But anyway, no, no, you're good. But yeah, so basically the point being is I saw him talking about, it was basically the directly after Columbine. He did a reactionary video, and he's so emotional, man. Like it felt authentic though. It felt like a genuine reaction. The guy like was brought to tears, just from the level of what he viewed to be government intervention, and obviously responsibility for this happening. I found it to be interesting because he mentioned something to do with these ancient rights, right?
Yeah.
And how essentially, yeah, this was potentially utilized in a way. Here we go. I put it on a note way back in the day when I first listened to it, like years ago, because basically he was talking about how I and it made me feel like he was acting in good faith at a certain level, is the point I'm kind of trying to make. But I felt like he had good intentions at the very least with this video that he had made, and he talks about the rites of Ishtar, Molech, and human sacrifice in the springtime, and that these events are conveniently scheduled
Yeah.
for the spring in order for this strange new age esoteric rebirth of the phoenix rising from the ashes in this new dystopian framework. And that's essentially what they're trying to do, right? Which is manufacture consent for landmark gun legislation to potentially cause an overreaction from the public, to provide a solution for a problem that was created by the entity that clearly assumes power and resides in the background behind the curtain. And
Yeah.
and there and so here we are again trying to, you know, basically identify who the power brokers are and who the political puppets are, and which one matters most, right? Which I think is the crux of our problems. But I will say that it was, I think, chapter 12 of Behold a Pale Horse, which I just loved it. And I felt like I should put that quote in as the introduction to set the theme and set the stage for the entire episode, because I talked about how Dr. Robert Duncan, who essentially, was briefed by the head of the Los Angeles FBI, right, at a certain point, and worked with a consortium of scientists, and then discovered that after interviewing thousands of alleged candidates of mind control, they claimed there was a modern Manchurian candidate program, right, and they utilized these EMF frequencies and things of that nature, to effectively green light these assets after their programming is complete. But the point being is, what did he claim? It was in order to manufacture consent for landmark gun legislation to properly to have to essentially manufacture the consent for the American public to disarm themselves, which is the ultimate goal. And so clearly that was almost reinforced, and it resonated in terms of the direct overlap to what Bill Cooper claimed in his chapter 12 of the 1991 book. And he says, for many years, the secret government has been encouraging the manufacture and importation of military-grade firearms for criminal use. This is intended to foster a feeling of insecurity, which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms, by using drugs and hypnosis on mental patients in a process called Orion. The CIA inculcated the desire in these people to open fire on schoolyards and thus inflame the anti-gun lobby. This plan is well underway, and so far is working to perfection. And I just felt like nothing was more accurate. And then also it reminded me of the artichoke documents of the special outline of the special H cases that I had read regarding. It was like this 1953 document from January 7th. And they talk about hypnotism in all these cases and how they could trigger them with a phone call. And at one point they go into SI and H experimentation. This was on September 25th of 1953 in the artichoke documents. And H experimentation was another one from 1954 in February. But they discussed the creation of hypnotized subjects who respond to triggers and who are willing to shoot people when they ordinarily wouldn't.
Mm.
And,
Yep.
it's just how many times, excuse me, can we have this essentially reinforced, right, at a level that's impossible to deny,
Do you
right?
remember when I had that argument with that asshole on Facebook? And it was like he was trying to say that MK Ultra
homeless
wasn't
guy?
real. No, it wasn't a homeless guy. It was just some dude that kind of looked like a homeless guy. Yeah, all right. I see what you're saying. But he was telling me like, oh, MK. I'm like on Facebook of all places saying like, I forgot what the event was, but you're falling for these division tactics, and you have this culture war that you're engaging in when really this is an orchestrated thing by military intelligence and the fruits of operations like.
Yeah, but you tell like we spoke about him like you're talking to somebody who has already been chewed up and spit out
Yeah.
by this system. They're already a complete victim, and the worst part is they don't even know that they've been victimized by it. They're pointing
It is
everywhere
the worst
else.
part.
So it's like, yeah, you're pointing out the overarching psyop of the theme of what's happening, and they're inside of it just being
Telling you it doesn't exist. You're
Yeah.
standing in the middle of it telling me it doesn't exist because you're in the eye of a hurricane, and you're telling me the hurricane doesn't exist because it's not happening right where you are. It's happening all around
it's
you.
already destroyed your life.
It's
And you're
dude,
kind of throwing a rope to the guy and he's slapping his side. I'm like, yeah,
when I hear
it's
this,
fascinating.
I'm like, wow, look at how over and over again Austin comes on the show and he goes, hey, look at this program
Mhm.
that took place decades and decades ago, and look at the way that the exact plot of it repeats.
Look at how they
over and
admit
over
their
again.
crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
then
like
you
you
read
can't
it.
even look at this and call it anything other but the fruits of that operation. It's exactly what we're dealing with right now, and we've been dealing with. And I don't want to sound like the nihilist dude in the the testimony that we were reading only moments ago, but these fucking idiots don't realize that they're being subjected to nothing more than an intelligence operation. And I don't even know. I mean, I don't think the truth is ever really a burden, but it is in this instance frustrating. It's frustrating to see it in what appears to be 2020 vision. It's crystal clear. This is exactly playing out the way that they intended it to play out. And it just doesn't matter because there are people that are going to simply never, ever see it. No matter what you show them, no matter what combination of words you use. That's a little bit frustrating sometimes to think about because that guy was, somebody I went to school with, somebody that I grew up with. And I'm like, you look at people and you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt based off of how your mind works. And I'm like, surely if I just say something compelling and show a person the things that I've seen, they'll come to the same conclusion. That actually is not true. Some
Right.
person could see the exact same set of shit that you've been subjected to.
Well, it's probably programmed within the programming when the programming is revealed to respond in a in a harsh manner, maybe even violent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They legitimately do have it does feel like one nation or honestly one world under mind control in a way, but at the same time, I think the obviously the knee-jerk emotional reaction is conditioned into the vast majority, whether they've endured a level of programming or not. I mean, that is essentially one of the just, I think, most valuable widespread uses of these techniques. It's been effectively entrenched systematically in a way to where it's just plaguing society at large. And I think even like a private Discord server or something, which I've seen so many of these modern mass shooters or individuals obviously are in these strange private Discord groups and servers where they're leading up to the event, where I was just imagining if you can legitimately activate Manchurian through EMF or something to this effect, or even through subliminal messaging,
I mean,
right?
shit, you could make them throw up blood.
Yeah.
What
All
else
you
can
do, dude, I saw one of my buddies, Namrock, who's like a
Oh
meme
yeah,
creator, right? Yeah, he's great.
Great.
I like
I
that.
saw him, I saw him tweet or post a meme following the Stranger Things finale, and he's like, "Hey, just so you guys know, it was always about gay aliens." And I was just like, "Hell yeah, that's perfect."
Yeah, dude. It is I don't want to, yeah, I guess, give the devil his due, if that is an expression, right? I don't know that I made that one up. But they have gleamed quite a bit, or gleaned. It
No,
doesn't
you're good.
matter.
You just make it. That's fine.
We're just making, all right, yeah. They've learned quite a bit from kidnapping thousands of orphans, from dosing Johns at whorehouses, subjecting people to traumatic media and peeling their eyes open,
Mhm.
Clockwork Orange style. They've learned a lot about how we work, and they have hijacked our nature magnificently.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Magnificently. That's
that
another
was
thing.
what
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just thinking that, my attempt to essentially, when I was trying to present the Paul Benassi concept of the video that I was speaking on, um, it's just interesting to me because it caused me to legitimately reflect back on and question the very concept of free will and how much we
Oh yeah.
legitimately can rely on our ability to possess this free will. And
Mm.
and 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 when and where and what circumstance is required to rob you of that God-given ability to of discernment. And just as far as I'm concerned, this is how they destroy right any kind of defense mechanism that you should have properly in place to reject this kind of unique brand of conditioning. But again, it's we're talking firsthand eyewitness accounts of the what allegedly happened at Plattsburgh. And the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because it ties in so directly to these techniques we're discussing. And that
Yeah.
is that apparently on the base, through basically there was a level of operation even on the surface, obviously, and that was even after it had closed, right, in 1994. And that's kind of what they were getting at, is basically not only was Dr. Ewan Cameron allegedly tied into Plattsburgh and the exportation of MK Ultra to the Montreal experiments. He created the psychic driving technique, which Sirhan is alleged to have been a primary and key example and candidates of that specific brand and technique of programming. And allegedly, there were individual patients who would go to seek treatment from just the regular psychiatric follow up for some kind of depression that you're experiencing, right? And then, for example, one woman sought out his basically his medical guidance, and essentially what happened is that she was just suffering from basic depression, right? And essentially, because she had no stable background or legitimate protectors in place that were going to follow up on her whereabouts and well-being, she was placed in constraints and held against her will in this medical setting through Dr. Ewan Cameron's legitimate. I mean, he's the one who gave the order to essentially go through this with this process, and then through the level of psychological, basically behavioral modification, he successfully broke down this subject's mind to a level to where she was legitimately apparently under the age of 7 years old psychologically, and that she even believed, and many of the patients that he worked with apparently they forgot the identity and of their parents, and they even began to believe their interrogators and the scientists and medical operatives were their parents. And
Ugh.
so if you're able to actually break a subject's mind down to such I mean, an absurd level, then by the way, she had to spend years of her life after this experience and trauma redeveloping an adult personality. That's how affected she was.
That
And
sounds
so
exactly like 11, who calls the dude Papa.
Well, there's like more occult tie-ins with Stephen King and his
That
magnum
guy
opus.
sucks.
Yeah, he does, but he knows some stuff.
Yeah.
His magnum opus, which would be the Dark Tower, and one of the recurring themes in it is when the main character Roland has come up upon something that is daunting, or something that he needs to be brave, or like a pivotal moment in the arc. He always like repeats a mantra to himself, like, I shoot with my gun, I aim with my gun, but I my heart. And then he tells himself, and it never really dawned on me until now, but it's important. Remember the face of your father.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think about often too. It's like as an artist, I'm like, can I even draw my father's face? Like if I had to close my eyes and pick it out of a lineup, or is it just
That's interesting.
his
Yeah.
like I don't know, the notion of him that I understand. Like when he's there, I don't even really know what he looks like, but it's like remembering the face of your father is pivotal if we're gonna understand where we are in this world, what's going on around us. And that, I guess that could even extrapolate to like, what is your father? Is your father God? Also just your father in general. Like we need to have that anchor point. But when that's removed, you can see how things like spiral and go completely nuts. But
That's a fundamental thing. Yeah.
Austin, I wanna put a bow on this now, because I feel like we've done a really good job at like at pinpoint at putting this thing down and really pointing at what we're talking about here. And obviously we're gonna have you back on again to discuss more stuff within this realm, because it just never stops.
I know.
Um, can you just tell the people really quickly where they can find you, where you'll be next, and what you're gonna be doing, bro?
For sure, brother. And you guys know how much I love and respect you. And I just as always, I can't thank you enough for these opportunities because it means the world to me. But yeah, just the ability to have these conversations too, man. It legitimately gives me hope, and that's where the black pill falls to the side, because I legitimately am inspired by these conversations, man, and the willingness for people, especially your audience as well, not only just the two of you, but yeah, that open mindedness is it has to be a part of your psychology, or man, you will just be led by the nose into doing the devil's bidding,
Yeah.
essentially is how I view it. And Paradise Lost, John Milton's book, right? Man, he so essentially it was referenced in the foreword to Michael Aquino's paper, which developed into the mind war doctrine, right? And by the way, it was Paul Vallely, who was an advisory council member on the board of Turning Point USA as early as 2018, who co-authored this book, From Psyop to Mind War: The Psychology of Victory, with that of Michael Aquino, the prolific pedophile Satanist. And it turns out that obviously when they discuss Paradise Lost in the foreword, they quote uh, uh, obviously John Milton's work, and he says the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. And I just thought, man, for them to actually put that in the foreword of the psychological warfare doctrine that is the mind war, it's just it should definitely justifiably incite a moral panic. Let's just say that, right? And I think that when you realize and you read through, and I would encourage everyone to do so. And I promise I'm wrapping up, and I'll plug in like 5 seconds. But I did think that it's worthwhile and going through, because you can see this and spot it in real time, and there's no more ignoring the pattern recognition in place that's so clearly and blatantly in your face. And so the mind war focuses on emerging and anticipating problems. This is the language they use: situations and conditions affecting the information environment, i.e., not only to manage the perceptions of groups and individuals, but to address the conditions and situations that fuel discontent and drive instability. Mind war provides the capability to resolve problems before they begin, utilizing 21st century scientifically valid, empirically based methodologies. Mind war is the equivalent of a mental preemptive strike. That's what they say in the actual book itself, right? So when
Apparently, they
you
could just say it out loud as they can, and it just doesn't matter for some
You
people.
can just say
No.
stuff.
and the only other thing is that we had mentioned this heretical form of Christian nationalism in a way, which I think is a misrepresentation and their attempt to hijack, right, any sort of well-intentioned and individual who clearly means well and wants the best in terms of has the best interest for the global society at heart, right? Truly, but inevitably is just a little bit too vulnerable and naive to not fall into these preordained traps. And that's what I'm concerned with, is that they will essentially usher in this new age dystopian antichrist system on the back of these well-intentioned believers that unfortunately fall into a manufactured false prophecy in a way. But I'm not at all saying that, denying a prophecy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, when you imagine that evil entities on earth would attempt to, misdirect the inevitable interpretation and conclusion in terms of the philosophy of your belief system in general, let alone the end result of what you're actually inevitably worshiping at the end of the day, right? And I think that's where you have to ask, what God are you referencing, my friend? Because I think most people say they'll reference God in all of these strange, manipulative ways to package this information for broad appeal. But in reality, it's a kind of poison pill, right? And I
Well,
think that,
well,
yeah, be careful.
something
That's
that
all.
yeah, be careful for sure. But like,
Mhm.
I think a white pill in that is that, so we notice they're not doing this with Islam or Judaism or Buddhism. It's going to come from Christianity, because I mean that's like there's the main religion within America. So we know that. Look out for that. We also know that it's probably going to come from right wing American Christianity, because left wing rejects that. So like they're too far gone. So look at that. That's a good indicator of when things are really about to hit the fan. I feel like we're close now, but there could be another iteration of this, of left and then back to the right again.
Mm.
I don't know how crazy things will get, but in the end, I think we do know this is going to come from some form of Christianity and some form of right wing nationalism. And it's going to
Right.
mix together. It'll be we'll call it the beast system, as they do in Revelation. So we know, at least we know what to look for. We know
Man,
we're like pointing in the correct direction.
I
And
call it, I'm sorry, go ahead, Top. I'm not trying to
oh, go
disrupt
ahead,
your
go ahead.
flow, brother. I called it the esoteric ideological system of control, and basically the new age form. So the new age esoteric ideological system of control. That's what I view as their legitimate goal of implementing this new age philosophy into the minds of the general public, wherever they fall. On the spectrum, and I think the only thing that I felt like was worthwhile in that context is, as far as in the mind war reference points, they legitimately talk about transcranial magnetic stimulation, magnetic reconnection portals, atmospheric ionization, hypnotism, magic, and what's called the phenomenon of religion in the context of something called internal religious psyop and the Army Chaplain Corps, which all seem to play a vital and prominent role in this mind war. And it all comes apparently after a section devoted to magic and what they call a spoonful of sugar, right?
Mhm.
And then they basically introduce the campaign, which starts with paramilitary operations under the guise of intelligence, emotion arousing violence, false flags, and the degradation of the individual.
We're right there.
They do such a great job of explaining their side. So much better than we do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of explaining
honestly.
their psyops. They just really nail it when it comes to just.
Well, they
giving
wrote the
people-
book.
I know, but it's just it's really in the way that
That's
they just.
really what I
Well,
try and
tell-
rely on, though. And I'll
Tell
tell
the people,
everybody.
man.
I
Tell
will.
the
I
people
will.
where they can find you. Sorry, brother.
No, you're good, man. I try and rely on them hanging themselves with their own
Yeah.
noose. And thank
Mhm.
God for that, right? Because we are provided with that brief glimpse into this underworld. And you know, I'm forever grateful for man, just the you know, innate kind of you know, just it's a part of my nature in a certain sense to reject authority, and I'm very grateful, and I feel blessed for that in a way, having that internally within me to rely upon. But yeah, everybody check out the Underclass podcast. Definitely, if you have the means to support me, the Patreon's the best place. I think the lowest level is $3 a month, I believe, and you'll at the very least get access to whatever this is, which is my paywall content with Brad Binkley and Sam Tripoli. So it's been a hell of a time, and man, again, I love you guys, and let me know what the dates are so I can actually get a ticket and stuff. And
Yeah, I'm going. I'm actually going after this show to go call a couple of places. So right now we're looking at the 6th and the 7th of March.
Okay. Awesome, dude.
Yeah. Hang out
All
after
right.
the show. Until next time, guys. Don't forget to obey, submit, and comply. See you later.